Cooper, the Chairman of Maidstone Joint Transportation Board, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this remote meeting of the board. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. This will include the instant messaging. Will anyone else be recording the proceedings? Please announce that now. I ask this so that people who are at the meeting will know if this will be happening. Perfect. I will now explain how we intend to proceed this evening. My role as chairman will continue. However, the responsibility for managing the meeting has been temporarily assigned to the Democratic and Electoral Services Manager, Mr. O'Connell. He will not steer the debate. He will merely assist in implementing the remote meeting protocols. A Democratic Services Officer, Ms. Parfitt, is also with us to produce the minutes and to provide procedural advice as required. Members are reminded that instant messaging will be visible to all those viewing the meeting and must only be used by members to indicate their wish to speak. I will now ask the facilitator to take the attendance register by reading out the list of committee members who will confirm their attendance by answering present.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. Just for clarity, I will be running through the Maidstone Borough Council members first, then the Kent County Council members, and then the parish representatives. So, Councillor Burton.
Present.
We've had apologies from Councillor Brindle given in the instant messaging. Councillor Clark.
Present.
Councillor Cumming.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Hinder.
Present.
Councillor Clements.
Present.
Councillor Powell.
Present.
Councillor Sams.
Present.
Councillor Wilby.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
Present.
Councillor Carter. I can't see Councillor Paul Carter on the list. Councillor Chittenden.
Present.
Councillor Cook.
Present.
Councillor Cooper.
Present.
Councillor Daly. Okay, I don't have Councillor Daly on the list either. Councillor Hodson.
Present.
Councillor Prendergast.
Present.
Thank you. And apologies have been given for Councillor Stockel in the instant messaging as well. And then we have Geraldine Brown and John Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. That concludes the attendance. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. I will now ask Mr. O'Connell to read out the list of officers present and which items they are presenting.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to apologise to the KCC officers, and I don't actually have their job titles to hand, so I only use their names. But from Maidstone Borough Council, we have the Director of Regeneration in place, William Cornell. I'm not sure if Philip Coyne is actually here. Bear with me one moment. No. And we have Mark Edgerton. I'm going to check that he's on the call as well. No, we do have Philip Coyne. We don't have Mark Edgerton at the moment. And then from KCC, we have Russell Borman for items 14, 15, 16 and 17, Susan Laporte, Jenny Watson, Paul Leary and James Lehane for item 12. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell. I understand from that previously there were two apologies that you've already mentioned. Is anyone aware of any extra apologies?
Just sent a chat message. Paul Leary sent his apologies. He won't be coming. He won't be attending.
Chairman, if I may speak, it's Rob Bird. Dan Daly certainly intends to join us, so he may be having technical issues.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much for informing me of that, Mr. Bird. I'm also not aware of any substitute members. Mr. O'Connell, could you confirm that for me, please?
Yes, Chairman, we haven't been informed of any substitute members.
Thank you very much. In which case we move to item 3 on the agenda, which is urgent items. And whilst it isn't an urgent item, I will propose that item 13 be taken after item 17, and that items 16 and 17 on the agenda be taken as one item. If there is no dissent, I will assume that this is agreed. No one has indicated any dissent, therefore I will assume this to be agreed. Item number 4, notification has been received that Councillor Paul Harper intends to speak as a visiting member on items 12, 14 and the adjoining 16 and 17.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. Item number 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Please only speak now if you have a disclosure to make. I therefore take it that there are no disclosures by members and officers. Item number 6, which is disclosures of lobbying. I will ask Mr. O'Connell now if he will ask all members of the committee and substitutes in alphabetical order if they have any disclosures of lobbying. They must answer either none or yes, and if so, specify the agenda item or items.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Burton?
No.
Councillor Clark?
Yes. I think it would be fair to say 14, 15, 16 and 17.
Thank you. Councillor Cumming?
No.
Councillor Hinder?
No.
Councillor Clements?
Yes. Item 12.
Thank you. Councillor Powell?
No.
Councillor Sams?
No.
Councillor Wilby?
Yes. Items 12.
Good evening, anybody that's listening, and if anybody wants to know, I am connected. Dan Daly, good evening to you.
Good evening, Mr. Daly.
I'll start again, Mr. Connell.
Yep.
Yes, items 12, 14, 15 and 16.
Thank you. Councillor Bird?
Yes, items 12, 16 and 17.
Thank you. I just checked that Councillor Carter hasn't arrived. No. Councillor Chittenden?
None.
Councillor Cook?
No, thank you.
Councillor Cooper?
None.
Councillor Daly? Any lobbying? Councillor Daly? I'll move on and come back. Councillor Hodson?
None.
Councillor Prendergast?
None.
And Councillor Wilson?
None.
Councillor Daly? Okay, Chairman, I suggest that when we next reconnect with Councillor Daly, we take his lobbying at that point.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much, Mr. O'Connell.
Thank you. That concludes the lobbying.
Perfect. In that case, we move on to item number 7, which is to consider whether any items should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. There are no Part 2 papers, and therefore I intend to take all items in public. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
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 Perfect. Thank you very much. In that case, I take it that that is agreed. Move on to item number 8, minutes of the meeting, which was last held as long ago as the 16th of October 2019. I plan to move, therefore, that the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of October 2019 be agreed as a correct record. If there is no dissent, I will assume that this is agreed.
There's one point I'd like to make, this is Councillor Cumming. Item 138, that heading should read A249, not A246.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cohen. That was particularly diligent of you. If we can ensure, therefore, Ms. Parfitt, that is recorded and the minutes be amended, please.
Yes, Chairman.
Perfect. On that basis, I assume that with that correction, the minutes are therefore now correct. Item number 9. Could I ask Mr. O'Connell, are there any petitions?
There are no petitions, Chairman.
Thank you very much. There are no petitions. Therefore, we move on now to item number 10, which is the question and answer session from members of the public. There are 4 questions from the public for this evening's meeting, I believe. I now ask Mr. O'Connell to unmute members of the public in attendance. Please do not mute yourself during this time. However, can I please ask that you remain quiet until you are called to ask your question. I would like to remind you that the question and answer session from members of the public is limited to half an hour. Whilst group leaders or their representatives have the right to respond to the initial and supplementary questions after I will move that the Chair and Vice Chair will respond as KCC and NBC representatives in order that all 3 questions can be asked by members of the public within the 30-minute time frame. Is this agreed?
Yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I take that is agreed. Therefore, for the first question, I now call upon Mr. Duncan Edwards to ask his question.
Good afternoon. Maidstone Borough Council has strong policy and planning for modal shift and active travel, but these are not always applied to planning applications. For example, on land west of Church Road, policies not applied were SEM3 of the walking and cycling strategy, which sets the requirement to connect certain road developments with H1(8), which is the land west of Church Road, and the Sustrans Walking and Cycling Assessment, which sets out the need for a route remote park from the south, makes specific recommendations on the Church Road site. What steps can be taken to make sure the full value of the Council's active travel policy is realised in future planning applications, please?
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. Maidstone Borough Council seeks to deliver on their cycling policies, especially those set out in site allocation policies in the adopted local plan, by making sure that cycle connectivity, access and parking, etc., are contained within planning applications for major developments. Cycling policies are a material planning consideration, and Maidstone Borough Council aims to promote cycling in dealing with major applications. Mr. Burton, as Vice Chairman, would you like to respond?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think I have anything to add beyond that, other than to remind us all as elected representatives that we're all diligent on behalf of the public in ensuring that all applications are considered, and to keep officers on their toes, that everything is included. We all have a collective responsibility in that regard.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Mr. Edwards, would you like to ask a supplementary question arising out of the original question or of the reply?
Yes, please. Could I ask, I'm a member of the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum, and I wonder if councillors could suggest anything more the forum could be doing to help support both Maidstone Borough Council and KCC in promoting and developing active travel within the borough.
Thank you very much, Mr. Edwards. I fear that I'm probably not qualified to answer that question in any meaningful sense this evening. However, I will arrange for a written response to be sent to you in due course if that is satisfactory.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I now call upon Mr. James Willis to ask his question.
Good evening, committee. Good evening, Chair. It's very good to see items being positive about cycling on the agenda, and especially agenda item 12, KB18. However, this route only covers part, or in fact a spoke, no pun intended, I realised that afterwards by the way, of the Maidstone TNBC border. This route only covers part, or in fact part, I spoke, of the Maidstone TNBC border. I'm sure the committee understands there is much concern with congestion, pollution and cycling safety along Hermitage Lane, that corridor. What can be done to provide a route as documented in the local plan for a cycle and walking strategy along the Hermitage Lane corridor and essentially into and with Tunbridge and Morley? That's the question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Willis. Unfortunately, no response to your question has been provided, despite the committee clerk chasing the relevant officers throughout the course of today for a response, which I do find rather regrettable. However, I will ensure that you receive a written response to this question in due course. I'm not sure if Councillor Burton has anything more to add to my response there.
Other than to share dismay that actually there's no information being provided for you to answer the question. And if I might refer to the previous questioner as well, because that opportunity wasn't given. Certainly at a personal level, I do try to engage with the Cycle Forum at every opportunity, attend some of the meetings, and there is a conduit there shared with other members as well, that we can constantly engage with the cycling community. And we're all ears and welcome many of your suggestions, and we'll continue to work with you to deliver cycle improvements across Maidstone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Burton. And once again, Mr. Willis, I must apologise that you haven't got an actually satisfactory response this evening.
Can I ask a supplementary question to that, to the officers that will be followed up?
Provided it arises from your first question, I do see no harm in that.
Yeah.
And in fairness, you weren't given the opportunity of a response, so I will allow that.
The supplementary question, but actually it's even more relevant now, actually, with the lack of response at the moment. Could any work or any sensible answers that come back from that, as the question walking and striking strategy along Hermitage Lane and into Tunbridge and Morley, which is the key to it, the fact we need to be talking to our neighbour, could that come back to this committee in some written format, or perhaps as a report? It is in the local plan for cycling and walking, and at the moment there is no clear plan, as I can see, to do that with all the Section 106 money in that area. So could that come back to this committee as perhaps could you consider, Chair, that it could come back to this committee as a report about cycling and walking down that corridor?
That's absolutely fine, Mr. Willis. The protocol is that a member of the committee must request it as an agenda item. Therefore, if I can ask the committee clerk to record that, I will request this as an agenda item for a future meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you very much. And again, I'd like to give Councillor Burton the opportunity if he does wish to respond.
No, I think you've taken the appropriate action, Chairman.
Thank you very much. I now call upon Brian Smith-Lowther to ask his question.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, councillors, officers, Mr. O'Connell and Olivia. My question is, regarding the Willingston Street Sutton Road junction, why can you not put forward the simple solution to solve the traffic problems by upgrading the traffic sensitive lights? Can you at least give it a try, and then, if it doesn't work, spend money on other alternatives? Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith-Lowther. The traffic signals at the junction with the A274 Sutton Road and Willington Street have been fully optimised to deliver the maximum capacity. Traffic signals are currently controlled by sensors within the carriageway, and there are no additional traffic control measures that can be incorporated to improve this junction. Councillor Burton, do you have anything to add to my response?
I think you're absolutely factually correct in that it is optimised, and I actually think that only leaves the single course open to us to actually make junction improvements there as the only way to enhance capacity. But that's territory that has been well aired at this Transportation Board on previous occasions, and it is down to members to actually support those measures to come forwards if we want improvement.
Thank you very much, Councillor Burton. Mr. Smith-Lowther, do you have a supplementary question arising out of the original question or the reply?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith-Lowther. This therefore concludes the question and answer session from members of the public. I'll now ask that members of the public present now leave the call and that they may watch the continuation of this meeting live on the Borough Council's YouTube channel. Thank you very much. In which case we move to item 11, which is the committee work programme. I'd like to draw the committee's attention to the work programme as the A229 and A249 links between M2 and M20 with the proposed new Lower Thames crossing, as included in the agenda for the previous meeting of the board, will be included as an item for future consideration. Moving on to committee reports, which is items 13 to 18 in your agenda pack.
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Webb.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I ask for another item to be included under the work programme?
That's absolutely fine. However, my understanding of the, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, is that that will need to be formally requested in writing in advance of future meetings.
Chairman, if I can elaborate, I did ask for a report to come to this meeting on work being undertaken to improve the Fountain Lane, Tunbridge Road, Farley Lane junction. That request was not agreed to. I wasn't given any reason, but I would like that to come back as soon as possible to this Joint Transportation Board.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. I do understand you were given reasons why that wasn't being included on this current meeting, but nonetheless, you are certainly welcome to request that to be heard in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. As agreed, item 12 will be handled towards the end of this evening's meeting. So I move on to the committee reports, which are items 13 to 18 on the committee reports. I will read out the agenda item and then refer to the officer who will be presenting the report, with any members or the public or representative of any organisations have registered their wish to speak, invited to do so after the introduction. After the report has been introduced, I will then advise members of the list I've received by instant messenger of those members wishing to speak, and then ask if there are any other members who wish to speak. These might be members who have dialed in. Members may be reminded that the use of the green telephone is sufficient in demonstrating their wish to speak. I'll invite the officer to respond as required during the debate. After the list of members wishing to speak has been exhausted, I'll ask any members who wish to come back with more questions, comments. If a member wishes to propose a new motion or amend the current one, I will ask for a seconder, with members going through instant messaging or indicating verbally, and the first one to signal will be the seconder. The seconder will be asked if they wish to speak or reserve their right. At the end of the debate, any amendments having been voted on, I will sum up, and the original or substantive motion will be put to the vote. If an item is for noting and the recommendation has been moved and seconded, I'll ask if it is agreed, and if there is no dissent, a named vote will not be taken. If a named vote is requested, I'll ask the facilitator to go through the list of members in alphabetical order and ask them for their vote, which would be for, against, or abstain. I'll have a second or casting vote regardless of whether I've used my first vote. The Democratic Services Officer will be asked to confirm the result of the vote, and I will then announce the decision. At the end of each item, I will ask for a brief pause while those who wish to do so leave the meeting.
Chairman, just as a point of order, please. I'm very happy to provide you with a little green telephone. If only I knew where the little green telephone was to put into the chat. If I could be, other than that, I'll just put a Q and a note for that there's a question. Is that acceptable to you? Because I can't see it anywhere.
That's perfectly acceptable to me, and I have to confess, this is the first time I've actually chaired a meeting on Skype, and I cannot see the green telephone either. So if people therefore could write Q or question to indicate their wish to speak, I don't see any reason why that isn't acceptable. However, I can see that Mr. O'Connell looks like he's going to say something on that.
So it's only if you wanted some assistance, Chairman. There is on the instant messaging at the bottom, there is a smiley face icon for emoticons, and within that there is a green telephone that you can click on and choose. It's a bit of an in thing at Maidstone Borough Council that different chairmen found that they preferred it when people used the green phone, but absolutely members can indicate their wish to speak however is convenient for them within the IM generally, as long as the chairman is happy with that.
Chairman, there is not a green phone on the little smiley faces that I've got on my one at all. I did actually think that might be where it was, and I looked for it there. There's not one. So
second from bottom row, third from the left.
Second from bottom. I've got a rain cloud, which is just about how I'm feeling at the moment. Second from bottom, third from the left.
Right, fine. In that case, you have a different screen to me. Just put a Q in the chat.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much, Chairman.
And we can get on with that, if that's all right. Now, I apologise. There seems to be a little bit of an error in the numbering of the agenda items in my briefing pack. However, it's item number 13 which has been moved, which we agreed, not item 12. So I apologise for that. So without further ado, for item 12, which is KB18 public footpath conversion to cycle track in Maidstone, could I ask Mr. James Lehane to introduce his report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, so this item is concerning the proposal to convert footpath KB18 from a public footpath to a cycle track. A little bit of background on this. In 2015, a public path creation agreement between Kent County Council and Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells NHS Trust was obtained to widen and resurface this footpath with a view to converting it to cycle track status. That's all been done. That work was done in the past. However, in order to complete the conversion and formalise the use of this as a facility designed for shared use, in order to convert the existing public footpath to that of cycle track status is required. So the proposal we're looking at is to carry out the final legal work necessary to complete this order in accordance with the provisions of Cycle Tracks Act 1984. KB18 runs from Hermitage Lane along the northern boundary of Maidstone Hospital towards Giddyhorn Lane and then joins with National Cycle Route 17. There's a plan of this that you can see at Appendix A. However, I should apologise. I noticed on the uploaded agenda pack there's some black lines that have appeared across the maps on there, but I do think you can see where it stands. So this cycle track will form part of a wider strategic network and will enable residents in the vicinity of Hermitage Lane to access schools and colleges in Queen's Road, Oakwood Park areas more directly. It's ultimately intended that this route will connect to a new direct route to the London Road Park and Ride and will allow our hospital NHS Trust to promote the route for staff and visitors to use as part of the hospital's travel plans. The funding has been identified by KCC to cover the legal costs and signage associated with the conversion of KB18, and an audit of the route has been completed to confirm suitability of the surface and width for shared use and conversion to cycle track status. As you'll be able to see on, I believe, page 10 from point 3 onwards in the agenda, the conversion of KB18 is part of wider aspirations to create a more safe and direct signed cycle route connecting the hospital and London Road Park and Ride. The other parts of this route will mainly be on road through residential sections. There is a preliminary plan for that at Appendix B, but it should be noted that that second part is still very much under development and requires consultation and further works before a proposal for it will be brought forward. Following approval, KCC will commence the legal process to prepare the order and undertake the statutory consultation with residents, landowners and prescribed organisations. From there, and subject obviously to a satisfactory outcome from that consultation, work to progress this order can begin very quickly. The agenda pack, this item was intended to be on the cancelled April JTB meeting, and so it said the work could commence in spring, summer. It still very much could commence this summer. It is just the legal order work. Thank you.
Hayne, as a notification had been received of a visiting member, I will first invite Councillor Harper, if you'd like to speak now.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to fully support this proposal, and most of you probably know I'm also the chair of the Maidstone Cycle Campaign Forum. This is a much needed proposal. I'd ask perhaps in terms of looking at the wider scheme, perhaps for Mr. Lehane, is in terms of where you cycle along Ash Grove, along that road where obviously the Palace Primary School is and so on, is to ensure that the road markings are such that as part of the national cycle route, which you referred to earlier, that it's clear that on each side there is a designated cycle lane within the highway, because you frequently get a problem in this area where cars park across the marked cycle path, and therefore cycling, especially for younger people, becomes one of avoiding parked cars and so on. So perhaps if, as part of the wider process, in the next stages on that, you could look into. And I just wondered really whether, in terms of Giddyhorn Lane, obviously you're showing that as a quiet road until you do the turn off to head to towards the park and ride. Giddyhorn Lane is also used by cyclists all the way down to London Road, so I don't know what status that might have or may not have. But perhaps if that could be something which could be looked into for the future as well, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Harper. That's very much noted, and of course we will be looking forward to engaging with the campaign forum as well as other local groups as these plans progress.
Thank you.
Much. Mr. Bird was the first person who indicated to speak. Mr. Bird.
Chairman, thank you. Well, I very much welcome the spirit of this proposal, and I would really, really like to support it as it stands. But sadly, there are one or two defects which I think we need to resolve before we can go ahead. They're not difficult, but I think they need to be looked at. And if I may, I will go through them. Firstly, if we look at the entrance to the hospital, that's not my dog. If we look at the entrance to the hospital, the current gateway going from KB18 to the service road going around the hospital is closed, and it has been sealed off because of the helicopter pad. Consequently, people are coming off KB18 a bit further along by pushing through a hedge and going over rough ground. I'm not allowed to show you. I have got photographs. I don't know if someone would allow me to share them with the Transportation Board. At the moment, I'm barred from doing that, but I'm happy to show you those photographs.
If we are able to allow Mr. Bird to show those photographs, I suspect it might be useful.
As long as you're happy to accept them, Chairman, as additional information for the board, then we can give that a go. Let me see.
Much help Mr. Bird's argument, frankly.
if I may, Chair, I can provide a little bit of information around that particular issue as well while we're just getting that image working.
Absolutely fine. If Mr. Bird can finish, and then certainly I will be more than happy to give you a chance to speak, Mr. Lane.
Mr. Bird, you should be able to share now.
Lovely, thank you. Right. Not tried this on Skype before, so let's see. Can you see that, everybody?
Yes, I certainly can.
What part?
Definitely.
Okay. And the other photograph I can show you is this one. That is the way through that people are currently using. So there's a bit of work to be done there. The other issue, two other issues I wish to suggest to you. Mr. Councillor Harper has referred to the entrance to Palacewood School, which is in Ash Grove. I am quite seriously concerned, and I think parents would also be seriously concerned, as should the cyclists themselves, about cycling past an entrance to a primary school where some parents will be parking cars, opening car doors and everything else as near to the school as they are allowed to park, some of them nearer than they are allowed. In addition, some of those parents will be spinning onto the road because they will be required to socially distance whilst waiting to collect their children at the end of the school day. So this is not an ideal place for cycle. And then when you get to the end of Ash Grove, you've got a very nasty turning from Ash Grove into Poplar Grove with very poor visibility because of a large hedge. And then Poplar Grove is probably the steepest hill in the whole of Addington. Now, I'm sure that the keen cyclist will say, what hill? That's not a problem. But for people who are merely using this as a commuting route, it is not very attractive. My suggestion is that actually many more people would be much happier, those of us who are less fit, would be much happier cycling up Maxwell Drive as an alternative route. And I think, if I'm lucky, I can show you this. No, sorry, no, that's not the ideal way of doing it. I'm sorry, I'm not sure I can. Oh yeah. It would be much easier for people to cycle up Maxwell Drive, which is this road here, and along Howard Drive there. Are you following my cursor? Can everybody hear me?
I certainly can.
Yeah. My cursor. So the logical route would be coming along Headley Road there, up Maxwell Drive, and along Howard Drive here. And then ideally, you could actually cut through onto KB19 and join with KB18 there, and take the cyclists off the highway as much as possible. But as you can see, coming along Ash Grove there, you're right next to the entrance to Palacewood School. You've got a very dangerous junction there, and this Poplar Grove here is the steepest hill in Addington. So, we all want this to work. We all believe that it is really useful to make KB19 an effective cycle route, but I do feel that we can do it better in terms of the connectivity with the park and ride over in Addington, which, to remind people, is just over here. And therefore, I would like to move that we ask for this matter to be deferred whilst officers reconsider the overall route from the park and ride to KB18, and also investigate with the hospital on how to sort out the entrance into the hospital service road, which is just here. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bird. This is a report for noting, so we can't move to defer it. However, if you wish to create a motion to that effect, then I see no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that.
Mr. Chairman, can I just interject and say that I've actually already moved something? I've indicated that in the instant messaging.
Apologies, David. What were you trying to? You're moving that the board supports the project.
Chairman, as point of order, can we actually move on a media that is not available to the public?
That's a very good question. I wonder if the clerk might be able to confirm this.
Oh, do you want me to take it, Olivia?
Yes, if possible. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So, in essence, what we have here is by using instant messaging, Councillor Burton, in the nicest way possible, jumped to the queue. We do use instant messaging to show that people wish to second something, because when somebody moves something and when it's their turn to speak, then obviously the debate then forks off to find out whether there is a seconder at that point, in which case we would allow instant messaging. I think it would be unfair to allow Councillor Burton to have moved something before it's been his turn to speak. So he did indicate he wished to move it, which I would have taken that had we come to him with no other proposal on the table, then he would have been cleared to move it. And then we've obviously got Councillor Prendergast, who seconded, I assume, Councillor Burton's motion. So in my view, we should take what Councillor Bird is proposing first. If that then falls, then we could move on to what Councillor Burton was proposing. Or if there is some sort of amended version of what Councillor Bird is proposing, based on what Councillor Burton wants as well, then we could sort of formulate something between them if Councillor Bird is happy with that. But in short summary, take Councillor Bird's motion first.
That's absolutely fine. I agree with that. And in the spirit of fairness, it was certainly Mr. Bird who had indicated first that he wishes to speak. Therefore, Mr. Bird, what you've just suggested that we defer this, are you able to sort of change the wording so that that could be a motion to for something to be done, if possible?
Certainly, Chairman. I propose that the board defer. If we're noting something, sorry, Chairman, I'm going to need some help from the clerk here. If we're noting something, I'm not sure how I can do.
Yeah. Well, if I might be able to assist you, I wonder if you could possibly,
Pardon, Chairman, it is for approval. Paragraph 8.
My notes here say that it is for noting. However,
paragraph 8 it says it's for approval.
Okay, Ms. Parfitt, can you confirm whether the notes that I've got in front of me on the briefing note are correct, or whether the actual report is correct? I presume, therefore, it is the report which is correct.
Right. It does. Sorry, Chairman. Thank you. The recommendation, as per paragraph 8, it does state that it is for approval. My apologies.
Not a problem. Therefore, Mr. Bird, I must apologise to you. You were absolutely correct in the first instance. So ignore what I have said. So therefore, we can take your proposal that we defer this. And my understanding is that already Councillor Wilby has seconded. Could you just confirm for mine and Olivia and Ms. Parfitt's benefit precisely the wording of your proposal?
Chairman, thank you. I propose that we defer this matter for pending reconsideration.
Sorry, Chairman, if I may.
Of course you may.
So the actual, for agenda item 12, at the top of the report, it does say for information. Obviously, the report author has then put down on recommendation 8, paragraph 8 or point 8 rather, that the recommendation is for approval, but the top does actually state for information purposes only.
That's absolutely fine. But what we need to know is for the benefit of Mr. Bird's motion or proposal, whether we are noting or whether we are approving.
Can I come up with an alternative form of words which I hope will get to the gist? I propose that the board recommends that the officers reconsider the routing of this cycleway through Addington, and also examine the entrance from KB18 to the hospital site.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Ms. Parfitt, have you got that?
I would actually like to ask if that could be repeated, please.
I wish I'd written it down myself. I propose that the board recommends that officers reconsider the routing of the proposed cycleway through Annington, and also re-examine the entrance from KB18 onto the hospital site.
Thank you. I now have that.
Thank you.
And can I just confirm, Councillor Wilby, are you still happy to second that?
I am still happy to second that.
Thank you very much. And if I could just ask the committee clerk, because I can never remember the exact protocol here, do we immediately move to the vote for this, or do we continue with discussion?
Thank you, Chairman. I would advise that a vote now be taken on the motion.
Perfect. In that case, a vote will now be taken.
Chairman, I don't want to interrupt, but about nearly 10 minutes ago, I asked to speak to this.
Absolutely correct, Mr. Daly, and so have several other people. However, the protocol now says that because a motion has been presented, we have to vote on that first.
Chairman, can I just be absolutely clear that it is within your gift to manage the debate at this meeting however you wish. Normally, when a very firm recommendation is given, which would basically resolve the item, we would look to move it. But ultimately, you have discretion at a committee to chair the committee however you wish to. So if there are a large number of members wishing to speak and make comments, which may or may not in this case lead to amendments or not, that's up to you.
Right. Okay. On that basis, I would be much more comfortable with taking all members of the committee who wish to speak. So I will continue to do that in the order that they have announced that. So next is Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Chairman. So apologies for jumping the gun earlier, and I do take that point of protocol. But the intention of the motion, as I was saying, is that this board would support this project. And actually, it's clearly set out in the papers that the next stage is public consultation. And I believe that that is actually the correct forum where not just Councillor Bird's considerations, but considerations directly from the Cycle Forum, other members of the public will all be taken into account. And I think that we're digging into the detail, and what we will actually do is just add delay to this. And I'm keen to actually see delivery. So, in offering support to the project, it's not a foregone conclusion, and actually we're just encouraging the process to get on and do it. And the next stage is public consultation. So I would actually be moving that we amend to actually say that we support the project as presented to us, and we don't need to go through this process of bringing it back on a deferral.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Just to really add even more confusion to this, can I take that you are amending Mr. Bird's motion?
I am moving an amendment. It'll be interesting to see if I have any support for that.
Thank you very much. Could anyone who wishes to second that please make themselves known in the chat now to second David Burton's amendment to Rob Bird's proposal?
I'll second that. Yeah.
Very much. I think John Wilson got there just before Gary Cook on that basis. So thank you very much. At this point, I do wish to take other people in. However, I do believe it is only fair that the officer has a right of response, because he did indicate early on that he was considering that. So, James Lehane, would you like to provide a response now?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just for information more than anything, and perhaps a little bit of clarification on my part. One, around the entrance, that gate and the access point to the hospital, that is absolutely an issue that we have identified and have had discussions with the hospital trust around the gate. There was a commitment made by them not to remove that gate, because it does have an important safety function when helicopters are coming in, but to keep that gate open and held open at all other times. I don't know whether this has been carried out since. That discussion did happen just before we went into lockdown, so there may have been some delay on actioning that on their part, but we'll be very happy to follow up to make sure that's been done. In regards to the other elements of the scheme and the routing through to London Road, there's absolutely a fair amount that still needs consideration for that part, and I'm grateful for the advice that you gave, Councillor Bird, at this point. But what we are specifically speaking to today is the KB18 upgrading of that part, with the infrastructure being there, and it is absolutely the intention for a great deal of consultation to occur between now and having a final proposal for the rest of the route.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lehane. Next to speak, I believe I have Paul Wilby, and then after that it will be Dan Daly. So, Paul Wilby, do you wish to speak?
That was more to do with the first second. But thank you, Chairman. I actually think, to truth, Councillor Bird and Councillor Burton are probably agreeing on the same issue, to truth here. I think we're going around the houses on this. I think really this just needs to be agreed, and Councillor Bird's proposed route taken into consideration, and as Councillor Burton has said, it will come out in the next stage. So, or rather than us go round and round discussing this, I think we just need to get this over the line.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilby. And next, Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't want to get involved in the minutiae of how we do these things, but we didn't have a debate on what Mr. Bird had proposed before he got overturned by an amendment. So, I'm now finding myself having to speak to the amendment, which I didn't really want to do. Because really what I wanted to say was that I don't think anybody within right mind would turn down the proposal of having some form of project of getting cycles into operation between 2 points which are obviously going to need a good route. Now, what my feeling is, we're looking at a piece of plain paper. What we're looking, I know, because it's my locality, the topography of this area. And what has been proposed at the moment is via Poplar Grove. And as Mr. Bird has quite said, it's very, very steep. The alternative which we would like them to have a look at has got two benefits. First of all, Maxwell Drive is about half as steep as Poplar Grove, but it gets to the same point eventually. But the thing is this, by going up Maxwell Drive rather than Poplar Grove, anybody going from the park and ride side would cut off at least a third, if not half of a mile of cycling along Ash Grove and up Poplar Grove by cutting off the side of the triangle. Anybody that knows the area very well would see that would be a very good point to make. So what I'm proposing is really here that however you get there, that we should say to officers, yes, we think it's a very good project, but we do think there is a better topographical way of getting between between the 2 points. So if I may, whichever way you want to do it, Chairman, I don't really care. As long as we get something which is going to be looked at again, brought back here. But in the meantime, we agree that it's a good project and it must be done. But let's do it the best way. Avoid Palacewood School, which can be done. Go up Baxwell Drive, cut off at least a third of a mile of cycling up a very, very steep hill when you've got an alternative which is half as steep and will get you there quicker. So thank you, Chairman. That's my point.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daly. I do have Mr. Chittenden who's requested to speak. However, if I may, if Rob Bird may come in first.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as Councillor Wilby has said, there is not that much difference from Councillor Burton and myself. We both want the right thing at the end. My concern is that if we present this to local residents in the wrong way, we will get the wrong reaction, and we should present something that is workable and very positive, rather than something that people will say, oh, well, that won't work, therefore I don't want it. It doesn't take a lot to put it right, but I think we ought to make sure that we consult on something that is right, rather than only half right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Mr. Chittenden next.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to agree with Mr. Bird about the alternative proposals. I've done a lot of work around there at various times, and that hill is extremely steep, especially for someone like myself, and I think for many other people as well. And of course, the problem with the school is a worrying one. It gets worse, as we know, with the schools. If it goes to consultation as it is, 90% of the people will only look at what's being consulted on. Very few people will understand that this about the alternative, unless the alternative is somehow incorporated in the consultation itself. And perhaps one or two reasons. Whether that can be incorporated in this document so it can go out of consultation early, perhaps Chairman and Mr. Burton and Mr. Bird can think about it in the next 30 seconds. But it certainly needs to be shown somewhere in that document that there is an alternative. And it's certainly, from my knowledge, it is the better route. It's small. I like the whole thing overall. It'd be nice to go ahead as soon as possible, but I think we've got to somehow build that in. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chittenden. Councillor Burton next.
Just a question to the officer. Can he incorporate this suggestion into the consultation?
Mr. Lehane?
So thank you. The later stages of consultation that would be involving the proposed wider routes, absolutely. I do think we have work to do before we're approaching public consultation on that. The consultation work that would start immediately after we got the go-ahead on this part would be simply on the Cycle Tracks Act order to upgrade KB18. So that would only include that element of it, essentially.
Thank you very much. Now, at this point, does anyone who hasn't indicated in the chat function wish to speak?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I did actually put in the chat a green telephone. I could still see it. It's sat in front of me.
Guys, I'm looking at it now. I'm very sorry, Councillor Kimmants. Please do speak now.
Yeah. I mean, it's obviously I looked at the map with quite an intrigue when Councillor Bird put it up there, and it seems that not only KB18 but quite a few of the public rights of way all converge on Hermitage Lane, yet there's no provision on Hermitage Lane for cycle paths. So I just wondered whether that could be considered at some point too, or even brought back to the committee next time as an agenda item.
Mr. Lehane, do you have a response to that?
This touches on one of the questions that was asked earlier on at the beginning around connectivity along Hermitage Lane. I believe there wasn't time this morning for a written response to be provided around that. I don't have all the details on. Apologies. I don't have all the details on that on the schemes and work there, but I am aware there has been a scheme and funding identified through Section 106 for cycle facilities on Hermitage Lane. Hopefully, a more detailed response will be able to be provided in writing afterwards.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clark next.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to raise a minor point also on that amended route. If you were to look at Howard Drive, where you would basically jump off onto KB19, you've actually got a significant, you've got the full length of KB19, which is behind the houses and fully protected as a cycleway, as opposed to the eastern edge of KB18, which is basically through the housing. So I just figured that it's almost an equivalent length there. Actually, you're cutting off a big corner, but you've got more of a traditional cycleway to the rear of the houses there on that alternative route.
Thank you very much. Now, is there anybody else who wishes to speak who has not been able to indicate so in the chat function? Rob Jarman.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just to go back to Hermitage Lane, and I should have pointed out earlier this evening, we produce an infrastructure delivery plan every year. For the last few years, we are proposing through the infrastructure delivery plan improvements to Hermitage Lane in terms of cycle provision, and we are looking to focus some SIL monies towards that cycle provision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jarman. As no one has indicated they wish to speak who is unable to on the chat function, now this is where the confusion is going to begin. So my understanding is that first we will vote on David Burson's rather somewhat technical alteration of the initial amendment. And then, assuming if that passes, then that is deemed as a motion carried. If it doesn't pass, then we would vote on Rob Bird's. Could somebody please confirm that that's correct? And then I have noted, Mr. Bird, that you have a point of clarification as well.
Okay, Chairman. So we have an amendment on the table. I think it may be helpful if Councillor Burton, having heard from the officers and everything, could sum up that amendment again. But the amendment's there. We would vote on the amendment to make it the substantive motion. Once it's a substantive motion, we would vote on it again, or it falls and we go back to the original, which is what Councillor Bird put forward.
Right, that's absolutely fine. Councillor Burton, could you please clarify what your
amendment
is? Thank you.
So my amendment is very simply that actually we confine the motion to supporting the project, and that includes the consultation process that would allow these amendments. And I think we've invited the officer to take on board the suggestions in that consultation process. And my motive is that we don't actually put bureaucracy in the way of delivery. So, it's just keeping it simple. Let's support the project. Let's participate in the consultation and get the job done.
Thank you, Mr. Burton. Can I just confirm exactly the wording you want on that amendment?
So I'm just going back in the IM to what I actually, it was simply that I moved that this board supports this project. And what I'm making clear is that includes the consultation phase.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So in that case, first we will vote on Councillor Burton's amendment to Rob Bird's proposal, and then we will take it from there. So if I could ask the facilitator to...
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Bird, please.
Chairman, I'd like just to, if I may, to go back to ask the officer to give us some clarification. The consultation he will be doing, will that be solely on KB18 without any reference to the cycle route within the residential areas of Addington? Or alternatively, would it, as Councillor Burton has suggested, allow flexibility in terms of the routing through the residential areas of Addington? Because if it's on either of those bases, I don't think Councillor Burton and I have a halfpenny sort of difference between us.
Yes, so the consultation that would take part in the first instance would be specifically limited to that order to upgrade the status of KB18 from a public footpath to a cycle track. The wider routes and plans after work had been done to identify the preference of route, there would be a further public consultation at a later date following presentation on it at JTB.
Thank you.
Chairman, if that could be minuted, I'm happy to withdraw my motion, and I think everybody in the board would be happy.
Yep, I would certainly be delighted if we could proceed on that basis. Not that I want to discredit what you're saying. So,
assuming that Councillor Burton is happy, but I think we have an undertaking from the officer there which we can all live with.
Yeah, Councillor Burton, are you happy?
I'd be very happy if my motion is now accepted as a main motion rather than an amendment. And as I emphasised, let's get on and deliver and not bog this down in unnecessary bureaucracy. And I do believe the safeguards of further consultation are there, and I welcome the assurance from officers.
On that basis, we will take a vote on David Burton's original, or what he planned to be his original motion, which was that I'm sorry, I'm just scrolling through the chat just to double get that.
This board support the project.
That this board supports the project. Could everyone say whether they agree or not?
Agreed.
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 Absolutely fantastic. In that case, we can move on. Thank you very much. Item number 14, the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members of the JTB, and thank you for this evening for inviting me to update you on the results of the public consultation that was carried out for the Keep Maidstone Moving schemes. I'm not going to go through the whole document that was produced, because I'm sure everyone has read it with a fine-tooth comb. What I will do is obviously just remind you of the schemes that we were consulting on, the duration of the consultation that was actually undertaken. The results are self-explanatory within the actual document itself, but then I would like to then go to the recommendations within the report and discuss those, if that's okay. So, as everyone knows, on the 29th of January 2020, there was a 6-week consultation period for what was known as the Kent County Council Keep Maidstone Moving consultation. This included the A20 Cold Harbour roundabout. It included the A229 Lewes Road corridor at the junctions with Armstrong Road Parkway, the Wheatsheaf Junction, Cripple Street and Bolton Lane, the A20 Ashford Road junction with Willington Street, and the A274 Sutton Road at the junction with Willington Street. We carried out 3 engagement sessions during the consultation period, one on a Saturday of a weekend, one on a Wednesday in the evening, and 2 sessions on Monday the 17th at Sessions House in Maidstone between 1 and 7 o'clock. In total, we had 218 people attend the consultation events, and there were 8,395 visits to the KCC's website, and the consultation material was downloaded 14,279 times. It would be quite fair to say that actually the numbers of responses to the consultation document were quite limited. We would have anticipated a lot more people responding to the actual consultation itself, given the amount of publicity that we actually gave to this, both online, in public, by flyers, albeit I know there were some concerns raised with members in terms of the distribution of flyers, which has been dealt with, and I can assure members that that company won't be used by Kent County Council in the future. So, as I say, I'm sure everyone has read and digested the document itself. So if I can just move to what the recommendations within the paper are, and then obviously that may generate some discussions within the board, and obviously I can try and answer any questions that members may have. 4.1, although the consultation result does appear to be negative, a lot of the responses that came back from members of the public who responded to the consultation itself appeared to not believe or misunderstand, or maybe that was our own interpretation of how we actually represented the benefits of the schemes, but they felt that a lot of the schemes wouldn't actually deliver what we said they were going to deliver, and therefore didn't feel that they could support that particular improvement at this particular time. There was a lot of concern, clearly, as we've spoken about previously in JTBs, around the Wheatsheaf Junction and the closure of Cranbourne Avenue. Clearly, we've taken some of that feedback on board already, and we do have an amended Wheatsheaf Junction proposal which isn't ready for public consumption within the JTB, but we are proposing to come to the members that are most affected by this potential scheme, and we are going to come to you and talk to you about what is different with that particular proposal, and obviously walk you through it. We are looking potentially currently at putting additional cycling facilities where the Wheatsheaf public house itself may or may not be removed. We also will undertake further engagement sessions once government guidance allows to more audiences. So, for argument's sake, rather than having a wider engagement session where people come and talk about 6 schemes, we will hone that down just to individual schemes where people can come and talk to the project team about that one particular scheme that they want answers to. We have again done a piece of work for residents to understand the impact of the closure of Cranbourne Avenue and how that traffic distribution will affect the surrounding roads off of Cranbourne Avenue, and again that will be communicated to the local members for their comment moving forward before any engagement with residents and stakeholders alike. 4.5, now probably this is a fairly contentious recommendation. Obviously there was a lot of feedback regarding the Sutton Road junction with Willington Street, and a lot of it was negative in terms of the amount of capacity benefits that this proposal may or may not deliver, or the short period of capacity benefits that this may or may not deliver by implementing a scheme at this time. And clearly there was still a concern regarding the impact on the surrounding vegetation. So at this stage, and again, open for debate, albeit this report is for noting, we would recommend that this junction be removed until such times that we can come back to JTB with a recommendation and scheme proposal that actually satisfies all of the criteria that was set out back in January 2018 by the JTB in terms of delivering a scheme that doesn't affect the surrounding vegetation. The second recommendation, or further recommendation on 4.6, is regarding Lewes Road, Cripple Street and Bolton Lane, and we've discussed this many a time within the JTB, and clearly this was always going to be one of the difficult junctions to actually design a scheme that satisfies all the criteria, but also be able to sell to the residents in terms of what they felt as a safe option for this particular junction. And again, it's recommended by officers that actually we park this scheme currently and re-look at the options, working with local residents groups and members to actually come up with an alternative that doesn't push the carriageway so close to the parade of shops that's currently there, which is one of the main concerns that the residents and respondees of the consultation had. Further recommendation, and this was through discussion with Maidstone Borough Council, is about the relocation of the Ragstone wall on the A20 Ashford Road junction with Willington Street. They've requested that we actually undertake further consultation in terms of the relocation of that wall and then any disturbance to the vegetation behind the wall, and obviously how we're going to mitigate the impact in terms of ecology, etc., which we've agreed to do so, and we will move forward with that. It's worth pointing out at this stage, clearly there has been some concern with the COVID-19 pandemic that we find ourselves currently in, and unfortunately that has had an adverse effect on the programme. Clearly we were working extremely hard to try and get all of these schemes delivered commencing this year, and if we hadn't been in the pandemic, that would have been achievable. Unfortunately, there are a number of surveys that we haven't now been able to undertake in terms of asbestos surveys, ecology surveys, etc., that have meant that we've had to delay the programme until a potential construction phase of 2021. Now that does bring a secondary concern in terms of the funding, as I'm sure all members at the JTB are well aware. We've had a time constraint from day one from the Local Growth Fund to deliver by March 2021. There was a blanket extension to that given by CELEP when the pandemic first arose, of a six-month extension. That's subsequently been removed due to government guidance, so we're still looking at a potential March 21 completion. However, it is worth stating to members that actually we are working with CELEP and the Local Growth Fund, and these schemes were always on the RAG rating and risk register, that there was a potential to extend the delivery date on these, and we are working towards actually getting approval to extend these for a commencement in 21, which actually gives us the opportunity to relook at things like the Cripple Street, Bolton Lane. It allows us to look at more active travel potentially on the schemes that we're promoting, i.e. walking, cycling, as is the guidance coming out from central government at the moment. So it's not overall great news, but I think we should absolutely take this opportunity to look at these schemes and see how we can improve them moving forward. But the recommendations, as I say, stand in section 4 of the report, and I welcome members' questions, and hopefully I can answer them as best I can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bullman. It was Gary Cook who had indicated to ask a question first. Mr. Cook, you have the floor.
Chairman, if I may.
Well, of course you may.
As we had received notification from Councillor Harper that he would like to speak as a visiting member on this item.
You're absolutely correct. I apologise, Gary. I will bring you in after Mr. Harper has spoken. So Paul Harper first, please.
Okay, thank you. I was going to confine my comments to the Cold Harbour roundabout, which is of all these road junctions the one I know best. And I note that the in terms of the consultation responses, that 18% of the people strongly agreed that the proposals would improve the situation, but almost double that, 37% of the respondents strongly disagreed that the proposal would actually improve the situation. And I think it's quite important that consideration is given to that going ahead. Like the fact that, the strong level of concern in terms of that proposal. And as somebody who uses that roundabout on a very frequent basis as a resident of West Maidstone, I think a lot of the issues and concerns would be that removal of the traffic lights really wasn't demonstrated how that would actually lead to an improvement in that junction, especially when elsewhere, for instance, on the motorway junctions with the M20, it's proposed to actually put in more traffic lights to actually control the junctions in places like Junction 7 and Junction 6 and so on. So I for one was a bit unconvinced that, as I say, removing traffic lights at Cold Harbour would actually improve the situation to what it is now. And that clearly came out from the consultation. So if you are looking to go forward with any further proposals on Cold Harbour, I think your case needs to be better presented and actually perhaps more detailed consideration have with local residents who use it on a regular basis, because clearly at the moment there isn't the level of support from the community for your proposal at Cold Harbour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harper. Do you have anything? Thank you, Russell, if you could.
Yep. So thank you, Councillor Harper. I mean, disappointingly, if you look through the whole document of the consultation, a lot of the schemes that we're proposing have a higher level of disagreement with the actual scheme proposal than they do agree, and that comes down to a lot of the responses were in terms of they didn't feel that it was going to do what we said it was going to do, and unfortunately, sometimes if we were to take all of those comments where people don't think that what we're promoting and actually demonstrating that will give benefit at those particular junctions, if we were to not do those particular improvements, unfortunately we wouldn't move forward with many of our proposed schemes. In terms of the actual traffic lights, and it's been well documented at this JTB, Councillor Daly, I'm sure will come in later on, but the part of the proposal and agreement at previous JTBs is actually to have traffic signals proposed for this junction, if indeed it is felt that they are needed, and I can assure you again that there's a design ready for traffic signals to be implemented if there is the need for them to go in once post construction. So clearly we understand your concerns, and clearly we want to carry on that dialogue with local residents who obviously know the road better than perhaps some people that don't live in the area. But I think the issue is we either make bold decisions now as elected members, and obviously officers can give you those recommendations moving forward, to try and solve concerns and identified congestion hotspots that are out there on the network. So absolutely, I take on board your point, but it is a case of a lot of these schemes, respondees felt that they didn't feel that what we were proposing was going to give the benefits that we said they were. So, unfortunately, sometimes we need to move forward with what we're proposing based on the evidence that we have from the modelling, etc., that we've undertaken to put that design forward.
Thank you very much for that, Russell. If I can just jump in very quickly, because I do have a question myself on that. My understanding from some while ago, Russell, was that there was a proposal for part-time signals at that junction, because there were some very serious concerns about some of the traffic flow if that wasn't going to occur. At what point was that removed, and is there a reason why the part-time signals seem to be now removed to a proposal to potentially put something in down the line?
There was never a proposal to put part-time signals. We were always against part-time signals because the problem with those is, the majority of time they're on green, and then all of a sudden, they go to red, and people aren't expecting them to go to red. So we discounted that as an option a long time ago in favour of a more permanent solution, which again, I'm sure Mr. Daly will have some words to say in a moment. But ultimately, we've got a solution that will put in permanent traffic signals if that junction needs it following scheme completion. So part-time signals weren't an option, and that was discounted a long time ago, and it's never been brought to the JTB that we would put part-time signals in.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Russell. I've now got Gary Cook for a question.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just going to talk very briefly about the Sutton Road, Willington Street junction. It was interesting listening earlier in the meeting to the question regarding the optimisation of the traffic lights at the Sutton Road, Willington Street junction. And I really just wanted to maybe get some assurance from Russell that that we are actually working at an optimal manner for those lights, but for the lights that are there. So, for example, if you are driving out of Maidstone along the Sutton Road, there is no left filter light that would enable you to go onto Willington Street until the lights turn green for you to either go forward or left. So where traffic is there are some opportunities, I believe, to look at the way those lights operate, and I think they could be better utilised, and local residents have made this case strongly. I think that the plan in terms of what we looked at for Willington Street and Sutton Road was significant and universally resisted, with the exception of very, very few. What we then said was for the officers to go away and come back with a more modest scheme. And what they've done is they've come back with a more modest scheme. Some people are still concerned about elements of that, which still relates to some of the land take, and whether we can do more than that. I kind of doubt in some respects. There's issues about where the bus stops are sited. If we are going to come back and look at this again, I really wanted to get a sense from Russell with a view to what? Because I think what we need to, as a JTB, accept is either we work with some form of more modest scheme along the lines that we currently have, subject to some maybe tinkering with it and improvement and enhancements along the lines of that residents have indicated, or we drop the idea altogether and we start thinking about alternative solutions to the traffic that is being generated in the Sutton Road corridor, and going to other parts of the not just down Willington Street, but finding its way down Gorecourt Road into Church Road and through all the rural lanes. What happens if we do nothing over a longer period, Russell, please?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Cook. Firstly, if I answer the question regarding the traffic signals, the response to the residents' question was indeed in terms of their optimisation as they currently are. So I've been informed by Toby Butler, who, as you know, manages traffic signals on the network, and they have a number of times been to those traffic signals, assessed them accordingly, and then obviously optimize them as best they can with the current traffic flows and the current configuration of traffic signals as they are. If we feel that there's the potential for implementing left turn filters, as you say, coming out of Maidstone going down Willington Street, or indeed coming out of Willington going left or right, then clearly we can look at that moving forward. But currently the response to the residents' question was in terms of their optimization in their current format. In terms of the scheme, and clearly I realise that this would be contentious in terms of whether we do nothing, as you say, or whether we actually move forward with the scheme that we've got, knowing that some of the residents are still not completely happy with the design, and clearly, as you say, bus stops was one of them. The biggest concern, as I'm sure you're aware, and I'm sure some of your constituents have been onto you, is around the requirements still to take vegetation. There's still a number of the cherry trees that would need to come out. Clearly not as many as before, but there is still a number of cherry trees that need to come out. And indeed on the Sutton Road service road side, there was still an amount of vegetation that needs to come out from there. That combined with the capacity benefits only being for a short period following post-construction, that's why we're recommending at this stage that potentially we either put a hold on it, and clearly that's what can be discussed either at this JTB, or we can discuss this beyond this, or do we actually look at, is there another option? Probably not, because I think we've given as many options as we can to the JTB in terms of how we implement a scheme there with minimal vegetation removal, but trying to get as bigger capacity benefits as we can. So clearly, if you were to leave it, as you say, traffic numbers are only growing, albeit, in these current times, that may or may not go back to what was the normal. You may see a drop off of people using their vehicles to actually go to and from places of business or pleasure. But clearly it will only get worse as we move forward. So the short answer is there an improvement that's needed at that junction? Absolutely. Have we got one on the table that is fully supported by members and residents? Probably not at this stage, but I am happy to work outside of this meeting with members to try and come up with a solution that is workable. And I think it's worth also saying, Gary, is obviously this money that we're proposing to use for this particular junction is actually Section 106 money. So we don't have the constraints like we do with the local growth fund. So A, it's not time constrained. B, we don't have to go through obviously all the business case. So we're not looking at that magical BCR number that everyone talks about. So clearly there are things that we can do, but I just don't think at this stage we're at a point where if we were to go out tomorrow to start delivering the scheme that we'd put within the consultation document, I don't think people would be comfortable with what we were proposing.
May I come back, Chairman, just very, very briefly?
Of course you may.
Russell, I'm very happy to have a conversation with you outside of this, and I think there are some resident groups locally that would be happy to meet with us to contribute to that process too. So maybe we can have a conversation about that outside of the meeting. Looking further ahead, I know that I'm aware that you will be giving an update with item 15, but I do think that some of the work on the Sutton Road certainly affects consideration of the Leeds Langley Relief Road, and some of that traffic junction was taken into account in the traffic modelling. I'm not going to be able to Chairman, to stay for the Leeds Langley Relief Road, which will please probably everybody else on the JTB, other than myself. I have to leave now, I'm afraid. But Russell, could you call me afterwards, please, and so we can catch up on that and make some arrangements on the Willington Street Sutton Road. Thank you, Chairman, and you'll have to forgive me. I have to leave.
Yeah,
Gary.
yeah, happy to do that, Gary, and I'll make contact with you and we'll make arrangements.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Okay,
thank you, Paul. Cheers.
Thank you very much. I have Mrs. Prendergast next.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Borman, thank you very much for your updates, both written and your verbal one just now. My question was going to be in two parts. Some of it has already been addressed by Gary, so I won't repeat that. I'm just a little bit concerned. I mean, it's no secret the interest that I've taken in the Sutton Road, Willington Street junction, because it obviously impacts on the residents that I represent. That whole southeast corridor has been of great interest to members, well, to local residents, to members at both authorities. So I was a little bit taken back to see that we are looking to defer matters here. And I'm also, when was that decision made to defer matters is what I want to know. And my second question was going to be about how it impacted on the funding, but you very kindly just reminded me that this is coming out of Section 106 money and not the SELEP money. So I'd just like to know when this decision was made to defer, because I certainly didn't know as a member at the Local Highways Authority and as a member who's shown a great interest in this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shalina. I mean, clearly at the moment this is a recommendation. I can give absolute guarantee that there's been no formal decision. It certainly hasn't gone to the Cabinet Member for Highways and Transportation. This was kind of really the first forum that we've actually had the chance to air either the recommendations and or indeed the results of the consultation document itself. And just to give members of the JTB an update, that full consultation document will be uploaded to the KCC consultation site in due course, so everyone can actually see the full document itself. So these aren't set in stone, Shalina. I mean, clearly these are recommendations, and it's obviously to get members' feedback on those recommendations. Clearly, as Gary has concerns already in terms of the Willington Street Sutton Road, and I'm happy again to involve yourself in those discussions with Gary moving forward. But yeah, I don't want you to feel that this is a done deal. This has been our first opportunity, if you like, and I know we've all been able to email everyone once since we've been in lockdown, but clearly this is the first opportunity that I've actually had to come to you with the recommendations based on that consultation. So as I say, it's not a foregone conclusion. Clearly we want to work up as many proposals as we can to get them delivered. I mean, clearly that's what we're here to do, to try and give improvement to Maidstone and surrounding boroughs. So what I would say is, if it's a case of if we want to still progress this, then clearly happy to do that. It's just coming up with a proposal that is suitable, that everyone is comfortable with. I just don't feel that at this stage we are at that point where we've got a scheme that residents and stakeholders alike are comfortable with delivering.
Chairman, if I may come back just very briefly.
Please do.
Thank you. Russell, yes, I'd welcome the opportunity to discuss further with Gary Cook. I think it does need addressing sooner rather than later, because by your own admission, you know, I think we all know that it's not going to get any better. You know, these are strange times that we're living through, but we also have a sense of the impacts on public transport, etc. And we've already seen an increased use of private vehicles on the roads in the last few weeks. So yes, I would welcome an opportunity outside of this meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, Shalina. I'll set that up. And you know, I think this is actually quite a good opportunity to actually take stock of what we had in the first instance and actually build on that. You know, if there are opportunities to increase cycling, walking provisions within these schemes, you know, absolutely we should be looking at that, but also obviously understanding the impact on the travelling public. So I will set that up and I'll get that over to you as soon as possible.
Thank you very much, Shalina and Russell. Next is Councillor Wilby.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It was just about 4.2 and 4.6 on the recommendations. In your report there, you did keep referring to members, but in the report it only states local member. Could I just ask that maybe that be changed to include ward members to go with it? Obviously, Paul, you know the work that we've done together jointly with yourself on this on the Wheatsheaf roundabout, well, the Wheatsheaf junction. So I would like the ward members added to that. So that's on both sides. And on 4.6, I am quite happy that this has been taken out, the Cripple Street, Portland Lane junction. Oddly, this junction seems to work actually better when it's not signalled and the lights fail, to be honest. And the loss of that verge has actually been used quite a lot recently over the COVID-19 period, when queues for the pharmacy have been all across it. So my other recommendation or question would it be possible to divert the funds, as you've already highlighted, to the potential improvements for future cycleways along extending KB22, the Loose Greenway, and I know there's already one mentioned about going down Pheasant Lane. If we could put the money to use on that, and so we don't lose that funding.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Wilby, and clearly the intention is to engage with all members. Apologies if that hasn't come clearly within the report. And as you know, we've been transparent all through this, and we've included Maidstone and county members with the proposals for all of the junctions within the Maidstone integrated transport package. If we were to look at removing a potential scheme from the integrated transport, absolutely we would look to divert that funding elsewhere. Clearly, it's got to still demonstrate the benefits that we're trying to put forward for all of the other schemes, but absolutely 100% we need to look at maximising that spend and making sure that it's utilised as best it can within the borough. So we will come back with a proposal to to the JTB with an alternative if indeed we can't find a solution for Cripple Street, Boughton Lane.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilby and Mr. Bourman. Can I just use this opportunity before we move on for further questions to remind members of the committee that the chat function is for procedural matters only. So in this case, only for indicating that you wish to ask a question. If you do wish to add to the, if you do wish to ask a question or make a comment, please indicate your intention to speak rather than adding it to the chat function. Next, I have Brian Clark to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I can only really echo Councillor Wilby's sentiment on the Cripple Street, Boughton Lane, Swan Junction. It has been a bit of a godsend having that frontage. And unlike many of the other schemes that are mentioned in the report, where overall it looks like there is sort of an anti-sense from the consultation, this one there really is an anti-sense. The local neighbourhood forum, local ward councillors, residents, really we're losing a big chunk of that parade if we move forward, which will address none of the issues at that point. The issues that we face on a daily basis is getting out of Boughton Lane and getting out of Cripple Street. So I really do welcome the fact that we're putting that on the side and we're looking at alternative options, and we certainly don't want to lose the funding that's available at this time. In terms of the Cranbourne Avenue, we'd certainly be interested in the modelling that you're doing on the impact on the roads around the Wheatsheaf and the looking at the alternative proposal you mentioned. But also Paul Leary is doing some work with the cycle route from the New Line Learning 5 Acre Wood. And I know from experience as a child that going down Pheasant Lane through Cranbourne Avenue and cutting across the cut in Pheasant Lane will get you to the grammar school. It will get you onto Moat Park and into the town. And we've got cycleways that go up to Moat Park now. I just think that we really should be looking at all those things together when we look at that junction, because there are some opportunities there. I'm disappointed about the Willington Street junction. It is section 106. We know the history is essentially money that was put aside from developers of the Langley Park developments. We've seen the modelling that Russell did with the ping pong ball going along the A274, and we all can see what's going to happen as the build out continues along the whole of the 274 corridor, not just in Langley Park. So I find it really disappointing that we can't move ahead with a scheme that's of real merit at that point. And I certainly do fear that if I was a developer and I was seeing something where the recommendation is not to go forward at that scheme, I would say, well, clearly there's no need for my section 106. And that's really the last thing that we want, is to lose the money that we've sort of fought for the road improvements at that point. But that's as far as I would say. I will be following up with you with the other members, Russell, on that junction with the Wheatsheaf.
Yeah, excellent. And that's absolutely fine, Brian, and happy to engage with you to share what will be the proposed revised design for the Wheatsheaf, and indeed the work that we've had done for the distribution of traffic due to the closure of Cranbourne Avenue. Just picking up on one of the other points, we're actually working with Miranda Palmer from KCC, I'm sure you are aware of, in terms of cycle routes and how we can actually join up, especially Pheasant Lane. We've already talked about that one, and we're actually looking at putting in cycling provisions within the Wheatsheaf junction to actually accommodate cyclists across the road and then along Cranbourne Avenue, but also indeed, as you say, that wider aspect of cycling and how we can incorporate that. So it is something, and again, although we find ourselves in a strange situation with the current pandemic, ultimately it has afforded us a little bit more time to actually make sure that we're putting measures in place that are actually future proof and something that is going to benefit all users moving forward. So just to obviously give you a bit of peace of mind, we are looking at those proposals.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clark and Mr. Bullman. Next, I've got Ian Chittenden. Then following that, I've got Dan Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, we started this whole thing in 2015. 5 years have gone by already. We've got very little. We've got a gyratory to show to it, and the Bearsted Road, thank goodness that one's going ahead. The government have given us 17,600 more houses. They've now given us 40% more houses. We've got houses coming over from Tunbridge Wells and goodness knows what else. We're at a low ebb with traffic. Now is the time that some of these, I know it won't be all of them at the moment because 1 or 2 of them are weak, but some of these really have got to go on the fast track to get started, and the sooner the better, Chairman. Without doubt, the south of the town is the worst problem. I've been involved for 20 years now on that, and 10 years as a borough councillor, and the sooner we do some work over there, the better. I just want a quick comment on each one. Cold Harbour roundabout is absolutely critical for the M20 and some growth on the 2020 site. This should proceed as quickly as possible. I think substantial work has been done. I don't know how it takes to push it through fairly quickly now, but that's one that should be going ahead. Likewise, the Loose Road, Armstrong Parkway, one of the most critical points in town. From there down to the gyratory in the town is part of the problem of the Loose Road, and it's one that, in my opinion, has had so much work done on it by everybody from all parties, from all groups. It looks pretty good at the moment, and that's the second one I think we really should be going forward today. Loose Road, Wheatshift Junction, pleased that we're getting close. Interesting when we get the new options, and I understand why they're needing new options. And Cranbrook Avenue is still a problem, but again, that is the critical point. If we can't do something with that, we've got a problem, and the time to do it, bearing in mind the traffic that comes along there, is as soon as possible. So again, on each of those three, we really have got to get our act together on each of those three. Loose Road and Cripple Street, I agree. I think this is back to the drawing board on that one. Ashford Road, Willington Street. This is my favourite, as you know. Ashford Road, Willington Street. I understand Maidstone wanted to have another look at, but there is a 1 mile traffic jam in the morning into Maidstone, leading up to the traffic lights. There's a 1 mile and longer traffic jam coming out of Maidstone every evening. Again, it needs to be sorted. I don't see why that can't be sorted fairly quickly, and we should be getting on with that one. I just want to talk about Sutton Road and Willington Street. As you know, I proposed we bring it a year ago probably now, we bring back the original scheme which provided all the answers for a 10-year plan at about £4.5 million. And it was turned down. I thought to come back for some tweaks. It didn't. It came back as something that's totally unacceptable, in my opinion. £2.5 million for something that will be out of date by the time it's finished. No additional benefit. The land we've got to buy. And interesting, the 106, the reason, of course, 106 money, which could be spent elsewhere, much better, was because the government under no circumstances would support it because it doesn't have a long enough lifeline. So, Chairman, with regard to Sutton Road and Willington Street, I'd like to ask, there is a recommendation on the papers, which I don't have a problem with, and I think it's all for noting in any case. I would have liked to propose an extension of one paragraph to the motion, to the recommendation. I just want to clarify, am I allowed to do that?
It's noting, however, unless I'm told otherwise by the clerk, I don't see why you can't propose that.
Okay.
But if I could have some confirmation, that'd be great.
Councillor Chittenden it depends on what he wants to propose, really. As long as it's within the gift of the board to do what he wants to do, then absolutely he can propose what he likes.
It's a recommendation, Chairman. So let me say it, and you might think this is going over old stuff, but I really think the problems on Sutton Road, Willington Street, that was presented to us in detail after KCC having spending £400,000 on consultants to get it to that stage, to give us a 10-year life span on it. So I'll tell you what I'm proposing. I propose that to minimise this continuing delay, that we bring back the previous detailed scheme which would provide improvements for the next 10 years and which officers confirmed was the best scheme proposed after investigation by 2 sets of consultants, but that we accept that minor amendments plus updating in relation to active travel will be needed, and we bring this back for further consideration at the next JTB.
I'm happy for that to be put as an amendment if that is within the rules. Having said that, it might be more proper if you simply request this as an agenda item for the next meeting of the board.
Yeah, my fear, Chairman, is that the next word an additional item. I can ask that, but there are pressures put outside of our meetings by others that tend to stop things happening of that nature, and I'm really concerned about how it's gone on over the past few years, and so I was hoping that we get some certainty in it.
My concern is that it does strike me as being rather undemocratic to bring back something which has previously been defeated by the board, regardless of its merits.
Yeah, the answer is that I would expect it to be amended to bring it up to date and to take into account our current thinking on activities such as cycling and walking. I just see this as a way that we can get a 10-year lifespan out of something that we haven't got there at the moment. Plus the fact it was a scheme that a lot of people put a lot of time and money, and KCC put a lot of time and money into. I was surprised when it was dismissed at the time. A lot of things were said at that time which just were not right, like 250 trees coming down. It never was that. I think it was 25 then. I think it's less now. I just feel that this needs to be put into some form of something made definite about it, because we've got to go on. People in 5 years' time, the residents are going to be very, very unhappy when they see what's happening to their junction in 5 years' time, and they'll say, "Why wasn't something done? We've had this before." And of course,
I mean, to be perfectly honest, I'm really not convinced that we should be using a report which is for noting to introduce a recommendation that something which has previously been defeated come back to the board. That is my concern. Now, if either one of the clerks could confirm what the constitutional situation is within NBC's constitution, I'd be very grateful.
Okay, certainly. So this board actually has very limited decision-making powers.
Yes.
So I think we need to bear that in mind in terms of what the board's requesting. So it may be worth finding out from the officers if, even if it comes back to the board, is it actually going to go anywhere for a decision at any point, or is it that the board is purely would be requesting it to look at it for its own ends, because this board can't decide which schemes go forward or not. That's for other people to determine. And then also, if we did want to take this forward in some form, so if the board did decide it was worth it looking at this, it would need a seconder, which we haven't got at the moment.
Yes, I have seconded it some time ago.
Oh, sorry, I apologise. Okay, we do have a seconder.
And as a point of order, we do proposals and we do make recommendations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. On that basis, could I ask Russell Borman to come back to give any input that he feels may be relevant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, ideally, as we've said many times ago, the 2018 scheme that was presented in January 2018 is the optimum scheme that gives the biggest capacity benefits. At the time, clearly, it was defeated at the JTB, and that's why we've now got the proposal that we have that went in the Keep Maidstone Moving document. Personally, and this is only my opinion, I feel that it still may face a lot of opposition. Bringing the 2018 scheme back, that doesn't mean to say that it's not the right thing to do at this time, or even indeed re-look at the 2018 scheme to see if there's other elements of the scheme that we had within the Keep Maidstone Moving proposal that we could implement to satisfy the requirements of the residents. I just feel that that we may well bring it back and it will only get defeated again. So that's my concern.
Mr. Chairman, I would withdraw what I'm proposing then, but I would ask that other county councillors from Maidstone be involved in discussions to see what we could to maximise it. We can't accept one that's going to just a waste of time when it's built, and to be honest, it wasn't worth the paper it was written on, in my opinion, when it first came out. I know where the pressure came from, but I think if we can say that we can, all the county councillors from Maidstone who want to be, can be involved in those discussions, not just one or two, I would be happy to accept that this doesn't go forward.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to do that, absolutely.
No, thank you very much, gentlemen. I do suspect that it is genuinely not in this board's interest to, unless I genuinely would encourage to have a much greater around what could potentially be done at this junction, but that we do have to take into account views which have previously been expressed. Mr. Daly, you are down to speak next.
Chairman, I'll have to reconstitute my constitution because I've been waiting so long. But anyway, I want to concentrate on one item only, Mr. Borman. You're quite right. I'm here and I'm ready to speak to you because you're my greatest fan at the moment, and I hate disappointing fans. Why are the lights on the Cold Harbour roundabout there now, was the question I've always asked, and I've never really got a satisfactory answer. You're telling me that you're going to double the size of that and everything will become swinging and everything will flow. The title of this whole business is Keep Maidstone Moving, and it's my object to make sure that Maidstone does keep moving and not get bottlenecked up by a roundabout which is going to block up every morning and every evening, because that is the way that roundabout was working before we put the lights in the first place. So there are only two lanes that come out of Maidstone. One is the A26, which is very narrow, and this one, which is even narrower. The A20 under the railway bridge is one lane coming out of Maidstone. And that will block up because the roundabouts in front of it now are such that they're not going to be light. If they're not light controlled, we'll have a real problem in the morning. The distribution of traffic coming off the motorway at junction 5 is unequal. The stuff that comes in towards Maidstone is not equal to that which goes round the roundabout and goes westward. A lot of it is commercial traffic, and a lot of it is very large HGV traffic. And without the brake put between the traffic movements, which are affected by traffic light signals, only with about 20 seconds of brake, will mean that Maidstone will block up. And I can assure you that. And if you want to prove it, switch the lights off now and see what happens. You just switch the lights off as they are now and see what happens. But I really am getting tired of having to argue this case, because I don't think it needs to be argued. You know, we've got the Poppy Fields roundabout, which has been inserted between the two parts of the road now since the original roundabout was put in. And we've got another one, the incinerator itself, which is on that same roundabout, is going to increase by 50% in the next 2 years. It's going to be a domestic waste recycling centre placed on the same site. And we've got, you know, so much traffic coming down to the Poppy Fields roundabout. I think the whole thing is going to be an absolute disaster unless you just controlled the traffic on that roundabout by traffic lights. I just don't see what the problem is in maintaining that. I understand that you're going to keep the circuits in there, and they could be put back in the event that there's going to be this, that, and the other. I just don't see why you need to change something which is working perfectly well now by making the roundabout twice the size is going to improve the things to the point where you can take the traffic lights out. I'm sorry, but I'm not talking about part-time lights. You don't need that. You need something which is really going to just break up the traffic flow round the roundabout and stop the congestion, which will inevitably happen if you don't have traffic lights there. And this, you've got so many objectives down the motorway itself where you've actually had to put in lights because of the blockages that take place. Junction 10 and 10A are just 2 points where you've had to do that. So I'm just making my point once more that this has got to be taken on board and taken seriously. If you want to keep Maidstone moving, for goodness sake, leave the traffic lights on the roundabout at Cold Harbour, and please get on with it. If you're going to do whatever groundwork has got to be done, please get on with it, because this is just getting worse. The pressures on that particular area around Junction 5 are now reaching critical point. The overdevelopment of housing and the overdevelopment perhaps equally of the industrial side of it as well. But if you don't want to hear any more from me, Mr. Borman, please let there be lights. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. It's certainly not an argument from me. Clearly, we've had many a discussion about this particular roundabout, and clearly coming out of those discussions, we've now implemented a traffic signal design, as you know, to be put in place moving forward if indeed it needs it. I'm not going to go into why we're proposing the large roundabout, because I think we've discussed it a number of times previously. In terms of actually getting on with the construction of this particular scheme, and I think this answers one of Ian's questions earlier. Actually, we are trying to fast track this one. We are trying to get it so it commences this year, because obviously we understand the importance of actually getting some of the schemes that we've been promoting, for, as you say, for the last number of years actually out on the ground. So we will be looking to go into the procurement phase of this particular scheme as soon as possible, with the intention of actually getting out on site at the back end of this year. But again, clearly we've done a lot of the work that we had to in terms of the modelling, but also we've taken on board the concerns raised by not only yourself, Dan, but obviously other members and public alike, and that's why there is a proposal for permanent traffic signals at that location if they are required moving forward.
Thank you very much. Next we have Councillor Burton to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was getting worried I wouldn't get a chance there because I keep putting green telephones and they keep coming back at me. But anyway, if you'll indulge me, I have two very specific questions to officers, and then I'd like to actually say my piece. The first one, and perhaps Mr. Jarman can help us. The Section 106 money that has been discussed, is it invincible? Will it last forever? Or can we lose it?
It depends on the exact wording. As Mr. Borman said, I believe the ones being relied upon for Willingdon Street, the southern end of Willingdon Street, they are not time limited. However, where it gives us the greatest problems, and I think Councillor Clark alluded to this, is obviously, without putting too fine a point on it, we are going to have to negotiate more Section 106s with developers, and obviously they will say, how can you ask for more money from us when you haven't spent the money we gave you some years ago?
Thank you. I think that's very clear, the enormous risk around losing the money.
Sorry, Chairman, can I just jump in? Sorry, David, I don't mean to interrupt you. I've literally just got up the unilateral undertaking 106s in front of me because I've got them easy to hand, and there isn't any time constraints within them. So just to give you that, that confidence, and clearly, there's obviously, as Rob says, there is a concern that why would developers give us money if we were then to not move forward with it or deliver anything, but wording within the 106 is that they are not time constrained, as some may be in terms of delivery within 5 years, 6 years, or whatever. I just wanted to give you that assurance that it's not in there. I've literally just looked.
No, but the principle I think is clear in section 106 case law is if it transpires that the need did not exist and the money wasn't needed, it will return. And it was, you know, for particular purposes. But anyway, let's park that for a moment. I think there's risk about that. My other question, Chairman, please indulge me. The report before us this evening is for noting we don't have decision-making capability. Please, can it be confirmed who will be making a decision on this and when? Perhaps that's Mr. Boardman territory. I don't know.
Yep, no, happy to answer, Councillor Burton. Clearly, as I said earlier, this was the first forum really that we've had the opportunity to show members the results of the consultation document. Clearly, we didn't want to put any proposals and firm recommendations to the Highways and Transportation Cabinet member for his approval until such times that we've actually had this discussion. Now clearly I know that the report says for noting, but obviously, you know, people have an opinion and clearly they air them at this forum. So moving forward from this, what will happen now is those recommendations contained within the JTB report will go with the consultation report that will be prepared to the Cabinet member for Highways and Transportation for him to make the overall decision whether we move forward with those recommendations or indeed whether he has concerns with those recommendations and asks us to amend those, in which case we will come back to the JTB and obviously make people aware of that. So as it stands, beyond this evening's meeting, the consultation report has been pretty much prepared with the recommendations contained as they are within the JTB report. They will then go to the Cabinet member for Highways and Transportation for him to then agree or disagree those recommendations moving forward.
And the timescale, do you think?
I would hope within the next couple of weeks we would have that all done and dusted over to the Cabinet member for his approval. Clearly, I can have a Teams meeting or Skype meeting, and I can discuss that with him. But yeah, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I will have a firm decision whether we move forward with the recommendations as they are contained within the JTB report.
Thank you. That clarity is useful. So, Mr. Chairman, what I really want to say is shame on us all. This is nothing but a political football we're kicking around. You know, I thought we were elected to make difficult decisions. It's 5 years plus since the £8.9 million was awarded to us through the LEP when I was Cabinet member in Maidstone responsible for that. And we have done nothing. We have delivered nothing. You know, we ask our officers for specialist advice, and then we go in this crazy mode that we think we know better. I think the Willington Street Sutton Road is the supreme example, but you know, there's elements of it everywhere. You know, we're sitting here tonight and we're saying things like, well, you know, it's obvious, isn't it? You know, you just stick in a left-hand filter if you want to turn left into Willington Street. No, it's not. The point is there's nowhere to wait to turn left. That's why the original proposal required the expansion of the highway space. But we think we know better, and I really question if we are serving our residents in this game that we are playing of indecision and fudge. I am finding it increasingly shocking. You know, we know the problem is getting worse. I'm going to use that one as an example again. I've lost count of how many times the railings on the corner have been sideswiped by HGVs, struggling to get through that junction. How long do we have to wait until there is a parent with a pushchair stood the other side of that railing? If you look at the opposite side of the road, now observe how part of the grass verge is becoming an extension of the highway because we're not providing the space for the cars to wait, and they are bumping up onto the grass. And you look at it next time you drive past and you see that the car tracks that are now becoming part of the, well, if it was a footpath, we'd call it a desire line. And I just think we are kicking this backwards and forwards. It's what could have been the danger with the cycle path thing earlier. Defer it, bring it back. Do an act of the impossible, Russell. We know that you've told us you can't improve upon that, but go away, look at it again. I just think it's shocking. We need to make decisions for our residents. You cannot make omelettes if you don't break eggs. And this is the territory we're in. I think you sense my frustration. But let's stop playing games with this. Let's be honest with ourselves, with our residents, and it's about time we delivered. I rest my case.
Thank you, Councillor Burton. Does anyone else wish to speak before we move on from this? I'll take that as a no then. In that case, this item is for noting only. I'll move that it be noted, and if there is no dissent, I will assume that this is agreed.
Chairman, Councillor Clark has indicated in the IMs.
Okay. Councillor Clark.
I do want to raise a point of order. Councillor Chittenden did make a proposal earlier, and I did second it. And I didn't withdraw my seconded, and I just wonder if we couldn't just go ahead and make that vote.
I'm going to jump in. It's my understanding that once it's seconded, it can't be withdrawn.
Chairman, if I could come in here. So, yes, whilst the seconder and meetings consent is needed to withdraw a motion, it does state in the Constitution that the meeting's consent will be signified without discussion, and as no one vocalised otherwise when Councillor Chittenden, withdrew his motion, then I would argue that it was allowed to have been withdrawn.
In this modern format that we're using, it's impossible to accept that, right? I'll take a screenshot of the IM that didn't transmit where I made exactly that point. Okay,
I think, we were originally discussing whether it was actually appropriate to do, and on that basis, Mr. Chittenden has withdrawn that. So, if we can just wrap this up on the assumption that it's withdrawn, I think that might be in everyone's interest.
Chairman, I, as a point of order, I think this was actually taken out of our list by a very similar proposal that was equal and opposite, and that went through. That went through fine. I don't see there being a difference with the sort of proposals that we've previously had compared to this one.
We've certainly previously at this committee, at this board, we have rejected a very similar proposal because it was on the basis of revisiting something which had already been overturned. So I would really like us to move on now, if we can, because we've spent an awful lot of time on this agenda item. We still have a few bits to get through.
Point of order, I believe officers will correct that you can revisit a decision if more than 6 months have elapsed, but correct me if I'm wrong.
Chairman, I would like to propose that we put this back on the table.
Well, we were having our original discussions at first, and it still isn't clear to me whether it's something that we have to or that we should take. So if I can just have some clarity from that from the clerk, that would be very useful.
Perhaps we could just test the appetite of the board, given how much time has passed.
I think the sensible course of action here is that although at the time when it was withdrawn there was no dissent from the seconder has clearly said that he would have liked it to remain. He's now proposed it. So if there's a seconder for the proposal now, it could then be voted on, and often the best way to work these things through is to let the vote happen and see how it goes, because it would be what the board wants ultimately or not.
Yeah. I did ask earlier on whether, first and foremost, whether on a report which is for noting whether it was appropriate to do that, and you know what the constitutional arrangement is for that.
Okay, so as I it's a difficult one to explain, really. I guess the board can request whatever it wants to request. If it's not actually got the decision-making powers to demand something, it can request, for example, that the officers look at that scheme again and determine whether or not it should come forward. It would be the recommendation and feeling of this board, if that is what it wanted to do. But whether that actually comes to anything, I mean, they wouldn't be approving that scheme, for example. Does that make sense?
But it would give a steer to the cabinet member at KCC for the appetite of this board, and I think that might be good at this stage.
Thank you very much. Mr. O'Connor, that didn't quite answer my question. I did ask whether it was appropriate. No, that's absolutely fine. I did ask whether it's appropriate and whether we should go ahead with that. You know, am I obliged in the chair to take that as a proposal now? Is it appropriate to do so? That was my understanding. You know, that was what I wanted to gain some understanding on early on. At which point, when Mr. Chilton withdrew his initial proposal.
Okay, so I would have taken it that at the point that Councillor Chitton removed his proposal, that the proposal was no longer on the table and it was fine to continue because we didn't have any dissent from the meeting. So I would have said that it was fine to withdraw that motion. However, we've reached a situation where I think you were about to move what was on the papers, but then Councillor Clark indicated his wish to speak. He has said that he wishes to propose this now, and if we look at the IMs, you can see that Councillor Chinton has seconded it. I think we need to be clear on what is actually being proposed in terms of what action is expected to be taken as a result of this, what steer is being given to officers, and then I think the board should vote on it because it has been proposed and seconded, and if it falls, it falls, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
That's absolutely fine. When you say should, what exactly do you mean by should?
Well, that we should vote on it, you mean, when I said that?
Yeah.
So that we do, as far as I'm concerned, at the moment, we have a valid motion and seconder.
Okay, so on that basis,
should vote on it. Yes.
Are required to.
Yes.
Fine. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. In that case, can we just be clear exactly what Brian Clark has now proposed? If you could just repeat that for the benefit of...
Can I help, Mr. Chairman, on that?
Of course you may.
Okay. First, I'll just say that I have to say what Mr. Ben Burton said earlier was from the heart, and I 100% agree with him. We've been too long in getting these through because of reasons outside of our remit in supporting the people of Maidstone, but I am worried if this small one, very expensive, serving no purpose, would go through. So I'm going to say I propose that to minimise the continuing delay, that we bring back the previous detailed scheme which would provide improvements for the next 10 years, for which officers confirmed was the best scheme proposed after investigation by 2 sets of consultants. I accept that minor amendments relating to update the scheme, and particularly in relation to active travel, would be necessary, but I would ask that this come back to the next JTB.
I'm happy with the wording.
Can I just clarify, Chairman, is that to recommend to the Cabinet member?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, in that case, assuming that we all know what the motion is we're voting on, can I ask Mr. O'Connell to confirm which way everyone intends to vote, please?
Certainly. So if members could answer for, against or abstain. Councillor Burton.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cumming.
Abstain.
Councillor Hinder.
Abstain.
Councillor Kimmins.
For.
Councillor Powell. Councillor Powell. He's not on the call anymore from the looks of it. Councillor Sams.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilby.
For.
Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Chittenden.
For.
Just check that. Councillor Daly.
Right, apologies, I now have to leave the meeting. So.
Councillor Daly.
You just press enter.
I'll just print it, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Daly is showing in the list, but he's not showing as being present. Councillor, apologies, Councillor Cooper, I didn't cover you today. Councillor Cooper.
All right, against.
Councillor Hodson.
For.
Just check this. Councillor Prendergast has also left the meeting, and Councillor Wilson.
Against.
Thank you. That concludes the voting, Chairman.
In that case, the motion is carried. I believe on that basis, therefore, we don't need to vote on the initial proposal because the report was for noting, but that motion has been carried, in which case we will now move on to item number 15, which is the verbal update for the traffic modelling for the Leeds Langley Relief Road. And this verbal update will be provided by Russell Borman. Russell, are you still there? This is slightly tricky because
I can't see Russell in the list.
His icon is still there, if that makes any difference. Which is rather tricky because the bulk of the rest of the agenda.
I am here.
Oh, he is here.
I am here. I am here. I haven't gone anywhere. Don't panic.
Fabulous. In that case, Russell, if you could take us through agenda item 15, please.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a verbal update on the work that was carried out by Kent County Council for the Leeds and Langley Relief Road. Consultants WSP completed the traffic modelling and traffic and economic assessment of several indicative routes in July 2019. As you would expect, a relief road would provide very significant traffic relief for both villages. However, this would be on the basis of effective restraint measures on the use of the existing road because, depending on the route and direction of traffic movements, the existing road would still remain an attractive option for drivers. A relief road would achieve a satisfactory transport economic return despite its high cost and would be above the threshold generally used for the Department of Transport when considering these schemes. However, it must be noted that this would need the development of several housing properties to actually give a cost towards the scheme for delivery. A relief road would provide a signed route for HGVs and resilience for the wider network. However, the modelling does not show a significant relief for the wider road network such as Sutton Road or Willington Street, but it would reduce some rat running, e.g. Gorecourt Road and Church Road. This is most easily explained by most traffic wanting to go around Maidstone is already using the B2015. However, unsatisfactory it is through Leeds. Most traffic has destinations in Maidstone, i.e. schools, offices, shops, etc. The attractive topography of the area requires a relief road to be a sinuous single carriageway operating under a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, in effect replicating a better version of the existing B2015. The fundamental problem still remains there is a very high cost and there is no obvious source of government funding
or associated private funding that would be required to fund development and construction of a relief road at this time. There is also increasing concern about environmental aspects and climate change that have an increasing importance when promoting a new major road scheme. There are also likely to be changes on traffic demand as work and lifestyles change post-COVID-19 that would need to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the first person to speak is David Burton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So partly what I'm going to say is under the guise of the Chairman of Strategic Planning and Infrastructure at Maidstone. That is the committee that is charged with bringing forwards the local plan review. So the main point that I really need to get across is, in spite of the inspector of the last local plan indicating very clearly that the review needed to consider the possibility of a relief road, we have not been given a detail or a proposition to actually consider. And I think we need to make it very clear to residents that Maidstone have done their best to consider a plan, all plan scenarios available, but because it has not been placed on the table as an option, and I'm not prejudging whether it would be successful or otherwise, but because it is not placed on the table as an option, we have not been able to consider it. And I believe that the timescale for the plan now prevents us doing that in a meaningful way. Mr. Borman did refer to funding, and this is chicken and it is egg. And he also referred to the fact that, you know, a number of developments could potentially fund it. So, you know, contained within the verbal update, I think there is a contradiction. There are funding opportunities to look at, but you can't look at something that is not on the table. So I express my own disappointment that we're in this position. I'm sure that I'm actually also expressing that disappointment for thousands, tens of thousands of residents that have been looking to us to actually consider this in a meaningful manner. And I think once again, politically, we have let them down. No pre-conclusions of its merits, but it has not actually been placed on the table for us to give it meaningful consideration. Shame on us all, twice in one evening.
Thank you very much, David. And for the record, I must say that I completely agree with everything you've just said there. Next to speak is Ian Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, David, I 100% agree with you. Though I've always worried about the scheme because of its price tag of 70-80 million, because we probably would have a few housing, 8 to 10,000 with the government. At the moment, they might change their mind, of course. We want an additional 8 to 10,000 houses or something like that for the area. And of course, the effect on Langley, it was not one I was fond of, but I was mainly not fond of it because I knew that there were those who wanted to try and take away the money from what we were doing down Sutton Road or what was needed in south of Maidstone to spend on that. Now that's gone by the board. So putting that to one side, all I'm going to say is at the end of the day, the one thing I do hope is that somehow, if even 5 or 10 years' time comes out in some form, if not, we have got to keep working on getting Leeds a bypass. I really, really believe it. Every time I go through there, when I talk to people from Leeds, Leeds should have had a bypass 20, 25 years ago, if nothing else. Okay, they objected to various things at the time. Now, I think that must be, if we can't make this big thing work, we've got to really think about a bypass and whether we can make that work. It really desperately needs it. Let's us support the people of Leeds. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chittenden. Does anybody else wish to speak at this point? Well, that's a much quicker agenda item than I ever imagined this one would be. This item is for noting, and therefore I'll move that it be noted. And if there is no dissent, I'll assume that this is agreed.
Agreed.
Great, perfect. Thank you very much. That report is noted. As previously agreed, we're going to take agenda items 16 and 17, which is the verbal update on the 20-mile-an-hour pilot schemes and on the active travel schemes as one item. And this will be presented by Russell Dorman again, please.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So although we're joining this these two items together, I'm just going to give you a quick update on the existing work on the 20-mile-an-hour schemes, and then I'm going to go straight into the Emergency Active Travel Fund, which has elements of that contained within it. There were numerous requests for county-wide 20-mile-an-hour pilot schemes, predominantly in the Maidstone area, which was being collated and progressed by a colleague in another team within Kent County Council. And to try and maximise cost efficiency, we were waiting to collate all of those schemes together to actually put out a county-wide survey of those areas. Now, unfortunately, due to the global pandemic, that work has unfortunately not been able to be progressed at this stage, and it's ultimately for two reasons. And we've been unable to carry out the traffic surveys as we'd wished to be able to carry out, and we have also been directing our resources to delivering the emergency budgets, such as the Emergency Active Travel Fund. We are looking to deliver various town-wide 20-mile-an-hour schemes via the Active Travel Fund, which I will come on to in a moment. And I would like to say at this time that this funding is time restricted, and we are looking to implement these pilot schemes as quickly as possible within the next 12 weeks, as is per the government timeframes that has been set to us. We are exploring with members, community grants and parish council some individual sites for the 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, and these include Hildenborough Crescent, Buckland Hill and Bourton-on-Chelsea. There may be an opportunity moving forward for this list to increase with tranche 2 of the Emergency Active Travel Fund, and again I will now come on to that. So the Emergency Active Travel Fund was announced by the Secretary of State on the 23rd of May 2020 as part of the work to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. This was rolled out to local authorities, and we were asked to deliver a pro forma back to the Department for Transport in quite a tight timescale. We actually only had a week to identify and complete this piece of work. The allocations for phase 1 were announced on the 2nd of July, and I'm actually very pleased to say that Kent actually received one of the highest budgets for what is known as tranche 1. So that's the support for the installation of temporary projects for the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, just to give members a bit of context in terms of what Kent County Council has actually proposed for that tranche 1 schemes, rather than actually identifying specific schemes within that pro forma back to back to the Department for Transport. Clearly, the timescales wouldn't allow us to actually do that. So what we did was look at how we can utilise that funding, which is £1.6 million within tranche 1, successfully within the 12-week delivery period that we've actually been set by DFT to deliver all of the schemes contained within the first tranche. Now we've narrowed that down to 5 themes, and they are as such: town-wide 20s, as I've just discussed, recreational cycling, repurposing of carriageways for pop-up cycleways, school travel streets, and modal filters and livable streets. Now they are the 5 themes that we are working with moving forward. We've taken the initial tranche 1 list of schemes to the leaders of the of boroughs and councils within the area, so they have had sight of that. Now, clearly, we want to deliver these as quickly as we can, because we are, as I say, time constrained with those. So currently within the Maidstone area, we are looking at progressing the closure and incorporation of parklets, which allow people to utilise the highway for recreational needs in terms of tables and chairs for restaurants and cafes in Earl Street. So we are looking at moving what is potentially the pedestrianised area down to Pudding Lane, obviously still accommodating deliveries, etc., for those premises that need them. And also we're looking at the use of King Street in Maidstone from the A249 all the way through to the mall as a pop-up cycle route. So currently they are the 2 schemes that we have being promoted for Maidstone, and I'm told that they have received local member support for those 2 schemes. We are under tight timescales, as I've said. The designs for those 2 schemes will complete by next Friday, the 17th of July. We have then got 2 weeks to actually programme the works across the county. So that will leave us then the remaining weeks within that 12-week period to actually get these schemes delivered. So what I can say to members is, moving forward, clearly we haven't got the time to consult with every single member that may or may not be affected by these schemes. However, we will absolutely give you sight of the proposals that we're putting forward for any potential comment that you may or may not have in terms of those schemes. But I would absolutely ask you to try and support these schemes moving forward, because we do have a very tight timescale to deliver them. In terms of tranche 2, government actually haven't issued any guidance on this tranche yet, but there's the potential for £6.4 million worth of funding moving forward for Kent, and clearly we do want to involve members moving forward in terms of what we look to deliver within tranche 2. So we will have more open discussions with members in terms of what we can deliver within that. We are looking, and I know we've potentially spoken about this offline outside the JTB, we are looking at the potential for a 20-mile-an-hour zone within Maidstone, and that will be contained to the town centre area, kind of around the Fremlins area, just to try and assist people getting back to doing their daily recreational activities such as shopping, going to restaurants, going to cafes and the like. So again, there's no fixed proposal for that, but it is something that we have identified as a potential for something that we can put forward in tranche 2. But as I say, tranche 1 is moving forward at pace. We are extremely pleased with the announcement from central government that we were one of the highest counties to receive the full 100% of our ask in tranche 1, and we do ask for members to try and assist us with the development and delivery of those in terms of their support. So that's where we are with the active travel fund and with the 20-mile-an-hour zones that were being requested prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boorman. My understanding is that Paul Harper will be speaking on this item. So, Councillor Harper, you have the floor.
Thank you. Well, it's obviously very encouraging that KCC's, been awarded this high figure for tranche 1, and as chair of the council's Economic Regeneration and Leisure Committee, I'm fully supportive of what we might need to do to help with Earl Street, because if we can get the restaurants and cafes down there making use of enlarged outside areas, that's got to help in terms of their regeneration. So those two schemes, that and King Street, definitely, I think I'm sure you get a unanimous support from Maidstone for. A couple of things really on tranche 2. I've had some discussions with James Lahan over the last few weeks in various forums, and I'm just wondering, because there might be more time to put the proposals together for that, whether, given it's around active travel, there might be the opportunity to have a county-wide meeting between the county council and all the various cycle forums across Kent to actually give them all a better idea of the type of schemes we're looking at, so that people who actually undertake active travel can actually feed back into the proposals. It's very easy otherwise for people sitting in Sessions House or elsewhere to come up with schemes. Well, they don't necessarily relate to what people actually who do undertake active travel really need. I mean, a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit within Maidstone town centre may sound a good scheme, but I wonder how practical it is, given that the speed limit down was Engineers Way is 40 miles an hour virtually until you get to Fremlin's Walk. So, whereas I can think of a number of other proposals within the Maidstone urban area for 20-mile-an-hour speed limits, which actually could be done fairly quickly with a lot of community support without too much disruption. And obviously, being the fan councillor, there was a petition I presented, it might be to a JTB or to Maidstone Council, where we've got the vast support of all the residents of Fan to make the whole of that area between Tunbridge Road down to the Medway a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit, and it's only got about 5 or 6 roads going into it. So a really self-contained area where you could see a really good benefit in terms of active travel. So I suppose really, just as I say, to sum up, can we look at across Kent getting a meeting of all the cycle forums and people interested in active travel in terms of taking forward tranche 2? And as a ward councillor, I would ask that can the Fan 20-mile-an-hour speed limit area be considered as a potential proposal for the tranche 2. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Harper. I mean, clearly we are awaiting the guidance from central government in terms of what they are going to be expecting for tranche 2. There's very small, limited amount of information that's contained on the government website currently in terms of what we can propose for that. However, having said that, Kent County Council has already put together a very large working group that includes a lot of the people that are currently working on active cycle routes, and we'll have those links into all of the cycle forums across the county. So yes, in answer to your question, there will be discussions with those forums, with those groups moving forward, but until such times we've actually got some guidance from central government in terms of what they are anticipating for tranche 2. We are awaiting that, but we will be collating and are collating what is known as the database for schemes for tranche 2, but we will absolutely be engaging with those forums to understand their concerns, needs, or indeed ideas moving forward, because as you say, you know, we're not the people that perhaps are out there on the ground, and also we welcome people's feedback for proposals for tranche 2. So yes, you will see something coming out, but until such times that we've got guidance on tranche 2, I can't say whether it, you know, when it will be, but it will be there.
Right, thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next on the list is Rob Bird.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to correct Mr. Borman on one particular point, Hildenborough Crescent is not, we're not waiting for that. Actually, the TRO was sealed about 3 months ago. We're just waiting for the signage to be put up. And that won't be a temporary scheme, that'll be a permanent 20-mile-an-hour scheme. So I don't know that really should be included on this list. And perhaps if I can give Councillor Harper a little bit of assurance to let him know that Councillor Daly and I have been working with Mrs. Watson and Mrs. Laporte on 20-mile-an-hour schemes in West Maidstone, including the whole of East Fant from Farley Lane eastwards, bounded by Tunbridge Road to the north and the river to the south. So the whole of that we are proposing for a 20-mile-an-hour scheme, and another 20-mile-an-hour scheme, which I'm sure he wouldn't want to raise personally, would involve Bower Mount Road and Oakwood Road, and I'm sure he'll be pleased to hear about that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bird. Next, I have Brian Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I do wonder on the order whether Ian Chittenden may have registered to speak before Rob, actually.
I thought that was for the last item, but okay. Ian, if you no, sorry, Mr.
Definitely
Sweeney.
last item, Chairman. I won't be speaking on this item. My apologies.
Okay, sorry about that.
No need to apologise. So, Mr. Clark.
Thank you. Yes, I won't go into any detail about the schemes that we sort of talked about, the junction scheme, so we can look at sort of active travel around those when we talk further about those. But the one thing that myself and my colleague Paul Wilby were discussing earlier is, as you go across the county and beyond, many of the new housing schemes are automatically 20 mile an hour. And with KCC being a statutory consultee at planning, I just wonder how challenging would it be for KCC to perhaps adopt a policy whereby, as part of their statutory consultation to the planning process, they can actually suggest 20-mile schemes as the default, and then if there are schemes where that wouldn't be appropriate, then maybe that could be part of your write-up going into planning. But it certainly seems to be that many other schemes and many other areas have a blanket 20 mile an hour with new housing schemes.
Thank you, Mr. Clark, and I'm answering on behalf of our planning colleague, so I apologise for my potentially lack of knowledge on this. But what I will say is I am aware that clearly when a new development comes in, they do look at the potential for putting a 20 mile an hour limit on that if indeed it is proposed, and clearly we make recommendations or objection to that moving forward with those planning applications. So I do know that it is done. Whether there's a blanket recommendation for 20 mile an hour on all new developments, I don't believe so, but someone may correct me if I'm wrong. But I am aware that if a development comes in with the potential for a 20 mile an hour, or indeed if we as officers in the planning feel fit that it should be a 20, then those recommendations are made.
I wonder if that might be something we could consider for, given that we don't have a planning representative here, whether we may consider that for an item on the work programme.
I don't see why we can't.
That would be great.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry for going quiet there. I was half expecting someone else to cut in, but I don't see why that couldn't go on the work programme. I think
it would be a good discussion to have, given the fact that it could be low-hanging fruit if we get them in as developments roll out.
No, I completely agree with you, actually, and I don't see why that should be an issue. Next, I believe I have Councillor Burton to speak.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I think broadly, this is some good news. And look what can be achieved in 3 months, creating schemes and getting ready to deliver them if the will is there. Excellent. I just want to take the opportunity to remind us all that Maidstone does have an adopted cycling and walking strategy, which contains a ton of stuff that is ready to deliver, has already been consulted, has support. It's time to link up the cycle path through the Park and Ride Moat Park, joining it up through King Street and actually delivering people to the station. But there's a ton of stuff documented, ready to go. It'd be great if we can go beyond that, but don't forget that there it is in black and white, ready to refer to.
Yes, if I can just pick up on that, Mr. Chairman, sorry, and thank you, Councillor Burton. Yeah, 100%. We are looking at all options, whether they're schemes that have already been designed, have got that full support, because clearly they're going to be the easiest to deliver. Ultimately, we don't want schemes that are going to face opposition. We want something that's actually ready to go, is easy to deliver, and actually gives real benefit to the community. So yeah, and that's why we're working with colleagues at Maidstone and James to get those suggestions forward for tranche 2.
And I believe Rob Bird has another question.
Sorry, Chairman, I thought you'd had enough of me, and I didn't intend to come back, but I just wanted to give...
I've never had enough of you, Rob.
Well, that's very sweet. And I'd like one of those gins as well, please. But I'd just like to give Councillor Burton the good news that yesterday the Department for Transport awarded Maidstone £150,000 towards the establishment of a cycle hub at Maidstone East Station, including work to complete the cycle route from Maidstone East Station through to Moat Park, which we should all celebrate.
Another good news story. Thank you very much.
I think the gins are on the chairman then.
Well, you're all welcome to come round, but I'm not sure that we'll all be able to keep 1 metre plus in my house. But nonetheless, does anyone else wish to speak at this point? I'll take that as a no then. As that was an agenda item for noting, unless there's any dissent, I will assume that this has been agreed. It has been agreed in that case. I propose now to take the agenda item 13, which was deferred from the very beginning of the meeting, just before our final agenda item. This is a verbal update from me as chairman and from David Burton as vice chairman on the progress since the withdrawal of the judicial review, specifically an update on the relations between both authorities. So what I will allow David Burton to speak first, and then I will come in afterwards. If that's
no, Chairman. I think your seniority should go first. I defer to you.
No, thank you very much for putting me on the spot. So, obviously, since the withdrawal of the judicial review, there has been a change in the way that relations occur between both authorities. Now, one of the biggest points that is very obvious is the creation of a infrastructure working group between both authorities. Regrettably, this hasn't met either in presence or virtually since near the beginning of the year. Now, I would suggest that although that in itself doesn't show that there isn't necessarily any breakdown in relations between both authorities, it would suggest that perhaps there isn't always the level of trust required. Whilst at one point it could be agreed that the board was meeting too frequently and that we actually didn't have things to meet about, we seem to have gone to the complete opposite now, which I do find somewhat unfortunate. And I think one of the symptoms of this has been laid bare very obviously this evening, in that certainly with the Leeds Langley Relief Road, there might appear to have been not so much cooperation on the basis that options simply haven't been able to be put on the table. Now, I personally don't think that that is acceptable. And I do think that there does need to be an increase in the level of working together and a degree of honesty on both parts on that basis. As an elected councillor, I certainly would like to believe that we are all here as democratic representatives, and we're intending to work for the best for those who we represent. I think further on, just to sort of expand that point a little bit, with regards to the MITP, there did seem to be a large amount of surprise, that some people had only discovered new items when they'd read that report. Now, whilst that's not, I wouldn't like to point the finger at anyone, it is rather symptomatic of the problem. So without trying to sound too pessimistic, it does seem that whilst we're no longer in the courtroom, which I think is obviously a very positive step, there must still be work to be done, given that there are still some very basic, not even misunderstandings, unanswered questions at such an elementary level. So whilst there's certainly been an improvement, I do think there is a long way to go. And I wonder if what David Burton might have to say, whether he agrees with that synopsis.
But thank you, Chairman. I think you hit a number of nails on the head, and there's probably little I can add to that. What I would like to do is to use this as a direct request to the co-chairman of that infrastructure group, Councillor Mrs. Prendergast and Councillor Cox at Maidstone, that you do actually convene that board very, very soon. We made great progress by sitting down and talking. It's almost at the moment like members are not being brought together lest we agree. So, I call upon the co-chairman to actually facilitate the next meeting with urgency, and let's get talking and let's start delivering for the people of Maidstone.
Thank you very much. I would certainly back up that that request. Thank you. And on that basis, we will we'll move on to the final item on the agenda, which is agenda item 18. Apologies, which is the Maidstone Highway Works Programme. This is a report which is entirely for noting, so therefore I will move that this is noted, and if there is no dissent, I will assume that this is agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much.
Agreed.
Well, on that basis, thank you very much, and thank you very much for bearing with us using technology, which in some occasions is far from ideal, but nonetheless, have a good evening, everybody, and I now declare this meeting closed.